Hey everyone! Tonight we're easing open a creaky door into a candlelit room where the wallpaper curls like sleepy ivy, and a small brown bottle waits on the washstand with the confidence of a bedtime bully. You're hovering over it, because your thoughts have been doing jumping jacks at 2 a.m, and someone swore this tonic could pin them down. The label promises calm, but your nose says caramelised metal and wilted salad. A quick reality check. If you tried half the things Victorians used for sleep, you probably won't survive this century. Honestly, you might not survive the week. So we're touring by imagination only, not medical advice, not even friend who insists ginger cures everything advice. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the map light up. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's get started tonight. You tuck yourself on the edge of the narrow bed, spring sighing like an old choir, and study the bottle again. The handwriting curls, lettuce syrup with tincture of opium and iron. Promises gentle sleep. Fortified for weakly nerves. You tilt it, syrupy, amber, unhurried, and the first sip tastes like rusty treacle drizzled over a salad that never wanted dessert. The second sip is somehow rustier, somewhere in your stomach. An imaginary clerk stamps a complaint and files it under "What were you thinking?" Joke 1. Your taste buds are drafting a resignation letter that begins, "To whom it may concern, not this." The apothecary had explained it with solemn pride. Wild lettuce, Lactuca virosa, scraped at dusk for its milky sap, dried into a resin once nicknamed lettuce opium, lactucarium, because Victorian branding loved to ride shotgun with exaggeration. Add a few careful drops of laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, and you get a lullaby in a bottle, or at least a very convincing suggestion to lie still and blink slowly, to tone the blood though he stirred in iron, the era's favourite fortifier. You can almost feel microscopic blacksmiths marching past your ribs, carrying tiny hammers, promising to pound your restlessness into horseshoes. Joke 2, if you wake up magnetised to the bed frame, we'll call that deep iron sleep. Outside, the street hisses and clops. Gaslight breathes behind frosted glass, the room wears honey-coloured shadows. A piano down the lane practices a waltz and never quite gets there. The city, no longer a creature of sunrise and sunset, has learned to stay awake. Factories sending steam into midnight, trains clanking, newspapers flying off presses at ungodly hours. Doctors call the resulting condition nerves, as if your body were a harp that anyone could pluck. Pamphlets warn against novels after dinner, warn against tea after 4, warn against thinking about being warned. You are, in short, perfectly primed to buy something that promises sleep without dreams. A lawful little bookmark slips into the moment. In 1868, Parliament passed the Pharmacy Act, buttoning up who could sell poisons and who should stick to peppermint, opium, and to increasingly blame for tragedies that began as cough syrup and ended as funerals, was tucked behind a chemist's counter, measured by weight, written in a ledger. You can picture your apothecary, pince-nez perched, weighing drops like a jeweller. He assured you this blend is harmless in domestic quantities, which is soothing until you remember Victorian households also used arsenic to freshen wallpaper. Historians still debate whether regulations truly protected the sleepless or simply taught shopkeepers to wink more carefully. You set the glass down and notice tiny glints at the bottom. Iron. Iron tonics are everywhere. Blouds pills, Shalabita waters, even steel wines that sound like a fencing match between Bordeaux and a blacksmith. One household recipe advises stirring a clean nail in lemon juice and drinking the result. Another suggests steeping a knife in cider overnight, then dumping the knife and toasting your health. The theory is straightforward. Paleness and lassitude mean a thin blood, and thin blood must be fed metal. It's charmingly wrong in the way a lost tourist is charmingly certain. Yet you sip again, because certainty, even charmingly wrong certainty, can be a sedative. The room keeps softening, like bread in warm milk. The opium spreads a coal of warmth behind your sternum. The lettuce sends a floaty hush to your fingertips. The iron does whatever iron does when invited to a party with poppy and salad. On the mantel, the candle bends into its own light, making a little stalactite of gold. Your ear collects the night. Neighbours cough, a carriage nudging cobbles, a dog giving a single bark as if to say, "Noted." You count your breaths, then briefly count iron filings, bad idea, then count breaths again. Historians still debate whether these tonics truly soothed insomniacs or just dulled them into a hazy truce. Diaries praise lettuce opium as kind compared to straight laudanum, less hangover, gentler landing. Others mention headaches, constipation, and that uniquely Victorian complaint. Dull mornings, which sounds polite yet devastating, like being unfriended by the sun. You roll the cool bottleneck against your palm and imagine where these ingredients began. A bitter hillside of wild lettuce, a far field of poppies nodding, iron boiled out of rock in a roaring works. The labour in your glass is vast. The promise in your glass is small but glimmering. A legitimate event visits your imagination like a brass band. The great exhibition of 1851 at the Crystal Palace, between giant machines and gleaming textiles. Vendors hawked restoratives with the zeal of carnival barkers. You can see yourself wandering those aisles, sniffing camphor and cardamom, trading a few coins for a vial labelled somnolent syrup, because who could resist a portable bedtime bottled under a roof made of light? The exhibition didn't invent insomnia, but it staged the century's optimism that everything, including sleep, could be engineered, packaged, and taken like a ticketed ride. Meanwhile, the quirky corners of household lore whisper alternatives. Little hop pillows sewn with dried hops because brewers' workers supposedly snooze like cats. A dab of goose grease on the feet. A nightcap with tiny pockets for apple slices, because fragrance might lull the brain. Shoes pointed away from the bed so thoughts follow them out. Your aunt's friend swears by reciting the Kings of England backwards. Your friend's aunt swears by not listening to your aunt's friend. Everyone has a ritual. Most of them require conviction more than chemistry. Joke 3. You briefly consider hiring the waltz student down the street to practice in your room until you pass out from second-hand embarrassment. The tonic's warmth settles into a steady hum. You let the pillow find its cool side, your cheek finding a valley it has known since childhood. A breeze tests the curtain and retreats. Thought ceases its marching band formation and reforms as drifting confetti. If this effect is placebo, fine. Place it carefully right here. If it's chemistry, fine. Let the molecules pass drowsy notes down a quiet hallway. What matters is the hush that replaces the hissing kettle of your nerves. As your eyelids lower, you consider one last question. Were Victorians truly more sleepless, or merely louder about it in newspapers and diaries? Historians still debate whether nervous disorders mapped a real epidemic of unrest, or pathologized ordinary fatigue in a culture newly obsessed with productivity. From your pillow, both feel true. The city outside invents fresh ways to stay awake. The body inside invents fresh ways to plead for quiet. And so you finish the glass, nudge the cork back in, and surrender to a sleep that smells faintly of garden sap. Iron tools cooling on a bench, and the poppy's red whisper from a hemisphere away. You wake to a pleasant thrum under your skin, like the afterglow of a purring cat, and for a second you blame last night's lettuce opium iron tea. But then you remember the new contraption waiting on the washstand, a velvet-lined box holding a crown worthy of a small kingdom of tinkerers. You've been told the diadem sends exceedingly gentle galvanic currents across the temples, persuading fretful thoughts to exit through the nearest ear. The advertisement called it an electro-soporific headband, which sounds like a bedtime story told by a telegraph. You loop the polished straps around your head, feel the cool of metal plates kiss your skin, and tighten until the crown claims you like a cooperative thundercloud. A cotton cord trails to a pocket-sized battery, 2 moistened pads sandwiching little discs of zinc and copper. The instruction leaflet recommends wetting the contacts with vinegar water for improved performance. You dab the pads, imagine your scalp as a sour salad, and flip a tiny switch. At once, a silver thread of sensation crosses your forehead, twinge by twinge, as if a polite eel is checking your tickets. Compared to the head squeezers some friends use, this is luxurious. No springs biting your brow, no plungers threatening your dignity. You breathe in and let the current hum, a tame lightning tuned to lullabies. The house has learned to hold its breath for your ritual. You sit near the window where morning is trying to decide whether to commit. The street below smelling faintly of coal, horses, and bakery crust. Your mirror shows a patient whose crown could either heal the mind or summon rain. The handbill promised a synchronized pacification of cerebral fibers, which is a very fancy way to say maybe your brain will chill. Historians still debate whether the Victorian fascination with home electricity genuinely relieved symptoms, or merely suggested a performance. Dim the lamp, don the crown, and enact the drama of science until you grow bored enough to sleep. Once, you might have visited a hospital ward to see electricity performed as theatre. In Paris in the 1850s, Duchenne de Boulogne famously used faradic currents to map muscles, coaxing faces into textbook expressions while photographers leaned in. In London's medical circles, lectures crackled literally, with apparatus that sparked and snapped, convincing audiences that all mysteries from paralysis to insomnia were simply knots waiting for a clever current. A legitimate milestone glitters in your memory. On December 31st, 1879, crowds in Menlo Park cheered as Edison's incandescent lamps burned steady through the night. Proof that electric glow could be tamed for ordinary rooms. If light could be domesticated, why not sleep? Your headband, though humbler, borrows that same optimism and fastens it right over your eyebrows. You practice the guiding instructions, think calm thoughts, avoid heavy suppers, and do not, under any circumstances, yawn with your mouth directly over the battery. Joke 1. The leaflet adds that gaping may disturb the current, which is exactly how you feel about your neighbour's singing. You try to imagine the current drifting through a meadow of neurons, stooping to tie the shoelaces of each unruly thought so it trips gently and lies down. The twinges soften into a fizz, like the memory of a cold drink, and you picture your skull as a quiet telegraph office, where the last message out reads SLEEP and the operator hangs her hat. Last night's iron is still in your system, probably having a tiny conference with the zinc and copper at the border of your headband. The age adores metals. You can't sit through a dinner without someone praising steel rails, iron tonics, silver nitrate eye drops, or the glorious copper wires spooling across continents. Your crown is a friendly cousin to the famous pulvermacher chains, those flexible necklaces of linked batteries that promised to electrify whatever ailed you. People wore them around wrists, waists, and, yes, foreheads, strolling like portable power stations. One quirky household tip even advises rubbing an ebonite comb briskly on a cat to charge it, then combing the hair to promote circulation and refreshing shocks. You decline for the cat's sake, but appreciate the commitment to a full-body experiment. You lower your gaze to the little dial labelled intensity. Temptation is a Victorian specialty. You nudge the pointer a notch. The twinges become a rhythm. Tick, pause, tick, pause, like a clock remembering it has a heartbeat. The sensation reminds you of the mechanical sleep regulators you once tried, those spring-driven metronomes that promise to pace your pulse into submission. The difference here is that the rhythm seems to arise inside your head. A private drummer with a velvet mallet, a yawn sneaks out, mouth well away from the battery. Thank you. And your shoulders loosen in a way your tailor would label unfortunate for posture. Joke 2, the headband hasn't solved insomnia yet, but your eyebrows have never felt so technologically advanced. Part of you craves proof, so you reach for the newspaper folded under the battery and read about the International Electrical Exhibition in Paris, 1881, where dynamos roared and domestic gadgets winked like mechanical fireflies. The article gushes that electricity will sweeten nights, a promise you underline with a fingernail. Another column warns of electrical quacks, peddling belts to gentlemen with private worries and convenient insomnia. It's the tug-of-war of the century, the miracle and the hustle sharing a single wire. Historians still debate whether public demonstrations taught citizens to trust measured doses of current or simply trained them to clap at sparks. You're clapping silently now, but only because it's working. Maybe. You adjust the strap, the velvet pressing a cool crescent behind your ear. The battery's faint tang of vinegar floats up. You taste it as if the air were a salad. You close your eyes and picture the city's cables running like roots beneath the pavement, humming under the wheels, threading through basement walls, delivering whispers to telephones. Your headband is just one more bud on that metal vine. Breath in, 2-3, breath out, 2-3. With each cycle, thoughts lose their individual names and fall into line like candles carried down a corridor by servants who know the rooms by heart. A memory drifts up, a lecture where a solemn gentleman declared that sleeplessness was a moral failing of the will. You remain impolite enough to disagree privately. If anything, the will is what gets you into this mess. The will to overread, over-worry, over-caffeinate despite advice. The will to believe iron could be stirred into lemonade or that poppy milk could be measured by daylight. The headband offers something simpler. Not will, but permission, current, like a creek. Doesn't argue with a rock, it flows around it and keeps going. You let it flow around the boulders in your mind until the water turns glassy and the fish stop writing you notes. Another adjustment to the dial, one notch down this time, because more is not always kinder. The battery ticks against the table. The street below begins its clatter. Milkman and paperboy. The baker's laugh echoing like a wooden spoon in a mixing bowl. You press your tongue to your teeth and feel the tiniest zing. A parlour trick you'll show exactly no one. Joke 3, your smile is now lightly electrified, which sounds like the world's most careful rave. Somewhere, a neighbour scolds a rooster for showing up to the wrong continent. The rooster scolds back in a dialect of feathery outrage. The city invents a new kind of awake. You consider the strange lineage of this crown. The ancient Romans recommended the shocks of a torpedo fish for gout and headaches. 18th century salons passed laden jars between giggling guests. Your era packages the sensation in velvet, adds a buckle, and sends you to bed with a battery and a dream. A small ledger in your mind notes that in 1882, London's Holborn Viaduct station received electric light, turning night into workable time, more light, more labour, more minds jangling, no wonder the diadem sells. The hum softens again. Your scalp warms as if a friendly hand has settled there, thumb brushing the temple where headaches keep their winter coats. Last night's opium residue slips another step into the background, and your knee-jerk of worry, what if this is nonsense, what if you're ridiculous, goes to stand in the hall and gaze at hat pegs. Historians still debate whether devices like yours helped through direct physiological effect or through ritual. The ceremony of setting it up, dampening the pads, dimming the lamp, and declaring to your nervous system that bedtime is a place, not a negotiation. Rights matter. You'll take any rite that eases the parade. When you finally remove the crown, the room seems rounder, edges chamfered, like a cabinet maker has passed through with sandpaper. You place the diadem back in its velvet cradle and wipe your forehead with a cool cloth. The battery keeps its tiny vinegar breath. The cord coils into a polite snake. You slip under the sheet and listen. Hoofbeats, a kettle, someone whistling the waltz that still can't find its ending. Your body answers with the simplest sentence it knows, be heavy, and the mattress obeys, a raft in a slow river. If sleep arrives, it will be blamed entirely on science. If it doesn't, you will still wear the crown tomorrow, because hope is a current too, and you're learning how to conduct it. The lamp sighs when you turn the tap, a soft serpent hiss that raises goose flesh on your forearms. The mantle hasn't arrived in your neighbourhood yet, so the flame is open and alive, yellow-orange like a cat's eye, and it eats the room's oxygen with a calm appetite. You hold a small brown phial to the light, ether, and it flashes with a shy, fast cold, the way winter flashes when you open the window for just one breath. You're not here to operate on anything but your own insomnia. You're here because the landlady's sister swore that drawing in the faintest whiff through a cloth takes the edges off. Last night's diadem gave your scalp a tiny aurora. Tonight, it's chemistry's turn to blow out the candles of your thoughts. You wet a corner of a folded handkerchief, hold it a respectful inch from your face, and let the breath come to it. The first inhale is like peppermint that's studied abroad. Cool, a little cocky, gone too soon. The second has a whisper of sweetness and a promise of nowhere in particular. You keep the lamp low, the hissing reassures you there's company in the room. Historians still debate whether people actually used ether as a do-it-yourself sedative or merely liked the idea of medical bravado. But the bottles sit in cabinets, the receipts hide in drawers, and the folklore isn't shy. Household guides recommended spirit of ether for headaches, nerves, indigestion, and, by a casual slide, restless nights that got personal. Across your mind drifts a legitimate milestone. A little theatre with a very bright footlight. October 1846, a Boston operating room where ether was publicly demonstrated and the crowd learned that pain could be dodged, at least for an hour. The news sprinted across oceans faster than any ship. No surprise your neighbours keep tiny flasks for toothaches and childbirth fears and, yes, for the luxury of forgetting wakefulness. If ether could escort you past agony, surely it could walk you down the block to drowsiness. You are not chasing oblivion, you tell yourself, you're just a Insomnia. So, I was asking your thoughts to loosen their cravats. The room shifts in miniature ways. The carpet's roses look more smudged and kindly. The washstand leans. Just a friend's shoulder, not an accusation. Gaslight makes a faint halo on the ceiling, wavering, because the night air is a negotiator at the window. The ether's chill kisses your nose with each breath. Your chest answers with the slow bellows of someone who has set down a heavy basket. You take a sip of water to reset the mouthfeel and make a mental note that ether and iron are not a pairing the palate craves. Joke 1, somewhere. A sommelier faints and blames notes of nail salon. You remember the rule whispered by cousins and cautioned by chemists: never catch the cloth too close to the flame, and never pretend your lungs are a laboratory. It's the Victorian problem in miniature. You live in a century that can pull light from coal, numb pain with a vapour, and draw messages through wires, and your instinct is to try all three before bed. The lamp hisses, patient. Its flame is the shape of a tongue. It speaks a dialect of warmth and spent air. Your eyelids hear it before your ears do, the way a cat hears a can opener 2 rooms away. You glance at the casement. The sash is shut because your landlady believes in the menace of night air. After the great stink of 1858, with the Thames behaving like a warm compost heap and London discovering the practical limits of tolerating smells, miasma theory kept windows latched. Air, suspicious by default, is not admitted to the party unless it arrives with a doctor's note. You hold back a laugh at yourself. Here you are, dosing your night with vapour while guarding against a breeze. Historians still debate whether fear of night air curtailed ventilation enough to make gas-lit bedrooms trickier. Headaches, drowsiness, dreams that felt like heavy furniture. You add a thin slice of reason. Crack the window 2 fingers. The room seems to swallow. Somewhere below, a lamplighter is finishing his rounds. Little ladder clicks against iron posts, making jewellery of the street. The flame over your bed keeps a correspondence with his, sending and receiving tiny letters of light. The ether's cooling touch keeps bobbing to the surface of your senses, like a pale cork in a dark bottle. You let your tongue rest behind your teeth, your jaw eases. You think about last night's electrical crown and the little drummer it awakened in your skull. Tonight the rhythm lives outside you, the steady hiss and occasional pop of the gas flame. Joke 2, your insomnia is a DJ now, and the playlist is called Ambient Hiss Volume 3. Quirky lore arrives with its shawl. Some households kept a fainting basket by the parlour, salts, a fan, a phial of ether, and a soft ribbon for wrists. Domestic theatre ready for swoons, genuine or strategic. Anecdotes say a few baskets wandered up to bedrooms, upgraded for nervous midnights. You can picture the contents like a still life. Lavender sprigs, a paper cone for inhaling, a handbell to summon someone who knows when to whisk the cloth away. You're alone with your version, a handkerchief, a saucer of water, the faithful lamp. The handbell is only in your head, but you'll ring it if needed. You take a brief vacation to the edge of medicine. Chlorine and ether were courted as air fresheners for sick rooms, dribbled in bowls, because foul smells were suspects and clean ones were sworn witnesses. Gasworks brochures promised cleaner, brighter nights. Housekeepers promised polished brass to match. Yet the complaints travel like rumours. Dry throats, gritty eyes, a stained ceiling where the flame licked too close too often. Historians still debate whether gaslight extended the insomnia by lengthening evenings, or ended it by convincing the body that midnight could be civilized. You land on a compromise. Light is a polite liar. It tells your eyes there's more day left than the clock admits. Your second dampening of the cloth is smaller, the way a good host learns but not to overfill the glass. The ether's cool reaches higher, a fizz in the forehead that matches, for an instant. The prickle from last night's headband, different instruments, same lullaby key. You catalogue the room's sounds, the faint click of the meter in the hall, a drip negotiating with the basin, a carriage wheel stuttering on a loose cobblestone. Each joins the hiss, which has become less a noise and more a bed you lie in. Joke 3, you consider bottling this soundtrack as Sleep Now with authentic Victorian gas leak. Decide the marketing department would get arrested. A small disciplined part of you counts down the breaths, 10, 9, 8, then forgets what number comes next and decides that is progress. Your hands float, then sink into the quilt like polite stones. Somewhere, your mind sets a paperweight on top of your to-do list. The room dims a little as the flame shrinks. You turn it up a hair and watch the jet burn bluer at the base. a tiny triangle of ocean under a sunrise of gold. The cracked window lets in a ribbon of cooler air that braids with the warm breath rising from the lamp. The two currents stroke your face in opposite languages and somehow agree. You pass through a narrow doorway of drowsiness and find a landing where the pictures on the wall hang straighter. Memory visits, a chemist reminding you that ether was once a parlour amusement before it was a surgical tool. Laughter and gasps and handkerchiefs fluttering like gulls. Entertainment dressed as science dressed a miracle. No wonder your age loves its cabinets full of bottles. You place your file in the saucer, cap snug. The lamp keeps writing its hissing letter to the ceiling, and you decide to stop replying, breath in, breath out. Your eyes close, not in surrender, but in a kind of good manners. Before your thoughts finally yawn, one last curiosity leans in. Some households swore by gasogene soda contraptions to freshen evening water. Tinkling glass, quick bubbles, a cheerful antidote to sultry rooms. You imagine dosing a line of ginger syrup into a glass, watching it sparkle, and toasting the lamp. To modernity. Even if modernity occasionally smells like a pharmacy, then you roll to the cool side of the pillow and let the hiss become a tide that rises and lowers your boat. A tide that doesn't demand navigation, only listening. The box is the size of a loaf of bread and twice as confident. You wind the brass key until it nips your thumb, then set the little wooden cabinet on the nightstand where last night's lamp hissed and the evening before's electrical crown hummed. Tonight, the work is simpler. You're going to borrow a heartbeat from a machine. The label called it a sleep regulator, but when the lid opens and the brass pendulum starts its tidy arc, you recognise a metronome dressed for bed. The tick is clean as a pin on porcelain. The tock returns like footsteps in carpeted halls. You hold your wrist to your neck, catch your own pulse with 2 fingers, and try gently to make the 2 agree. The instructions, lettered with the same pride your apothecary used, advise this. Set the tempo just slower than your pulse so your blood has a small target to chase. The mind loves to mirror, it says, which is a poetic way of admitting you're an easily hypnotised mammal. You nudge the sliding weight down the pendulum rod, the clicks widen, making space for your breath. Breath in, tick. Breath out, tock. The room receives the rhythm and tucks it into the corners. Curtain hem, chair leg, the hairline crack in the ceiling that looks like a river drawn by a tipsy cartographer. Your first joke arrives uninvited. If sleep were a train, this is the conductor tapping his watch and asking your worries to buy a ticket or get off at the next stop. You smile, your jaw easing a notch. The metronome does not smile back, it is busy being purposeful. You rest your palm on the warm wooden lid and feel a faint tremor. The cabinet purring like a small, responsible cat buried under taxes. A legitimate historical thread curls through the room in the early 19th century. A showman named Melzel popularised the metronome, selling it to musicians who wanted a neutral friend to argue with. Before him, another mind, Winkle, had an earlier claim, and the 2 names still jostle in footnotes like elbows in a gallery. Historians still debate whether the credit for the modern metronome belongs to the ingenious craftsman or the ingenious marketer. Either way, this tidy pendulum survived the quarrel and migrated from pianos to nightstands, where it now claims expertise over the human tide inside your ribs. You're supposed to lie still and let the clock do the walking. The bed accepts this plan, the mattress gives a diplomatic sigh. Tick, you meet it with a breath. Tock, you release. After a minute or 5, time melts into syrup around a good tick. Your heartbeat is less a drummer and more a dancer who's been gently led into a waltz. This may be science or theatre, you're not proud. You've let lettuce be your lullaby and ether be your snowflake. What's one more instrument in the orchestra? A quirky household tip pops up from a cousin's letter. Tuck a pocket watch under the pillow so the tick whispers through feathers. The trick, she wrote, is to turn the watch face down so you're not tempted to time your failure. You try the idea with your own battered watch as the regulator's wingman. The metronome is the bell tower. The watch is the whispering monk between them. A monastery forms, one you swear smells like boiled linen and beeswax polish. The usual fragrances of well-behaved sleep. Your second joke breezes in. If you fall asleep now, please credit certified chronometric sedation. And if you don't, the customer service department is a cheerful ghost reachable by tapping the headboard 3 times. You test the tap anyway. The headboard returns a low note that the metronome recruits into its choir. Tick, tock. thrumming, an accidental harmony you didn't know your room possessed. The mind tries its usual tricks, inventorying breakfast items, reciting the alphabet of worries, composing a letter you'll never send, but the ticks keep turning those sentences into beads on a string, identical, unimportant. You ride the simple machine, inhale on odd ticks, exhale on even ticks, somewhere. Your neighbour's clock chimes the half hour with a wheeze that sounds like a teapot discovering opera. Your regulator does not care for gossip. It keeps perfect time with itself and invites you to follow or be bored. Boredom, it turns out, is an underappreciated sedative. You think about the centuries' obsession with pacing. Factory whistles carve the day. Train timetables demand obedience. Telegraph offices measure messages by the second. Even the 1851 exhibition admired machines that could be trusted to repeat themselves better than any human hand. Bringing a metronome to bed sounds absurd until you admit that your brain is just another workshop with too many apprentices and not enough foremen. Tonight, the foreman wears polished walnut and speaks in clicks. Your breath smooths. You can feel the rhythm in the mattress springs, a hint of motion that isn't motion, like floating on a dock that rocks less than the lake but more than land. The pendulum's arc marks a narrow doorway that you keep walking through and back again, each pass sanding the edges off your thoughts. Historians still debate whether these devices worked by entraining physiological rhythms, heart rate, respiratory cycles, or by enforcing a ritual that told the body what the clock insisted the town obey. Your own verdict, gently provisional, the body likes being given a small job with clear instructions. Memory brings another legitimate touchpoint. The late-century craze for hygiene of sleep. Lectures in crowded halls where experts advised fixed bedtimes, cool rooms, and the avoidance of spicy suppers and overheated arguments. Some recommended a metronome explicitly, claiming that harmonic pulsation could quiet palpitations. Others warned that the ticking might distress the delicate temperament, which is Victorian for "don't at me if you hate it." You find yourself between those opinion poles, deciding the tick is as comforting as a cat's purr if the cat also keeps the minutes. To test the principle, you pause the pendulum with 2 fingers. The sudden silence is a velvet curtain. Your heart stumbles once, then improvises. The room's other noises get brave. A cart rattles, a distant shout turns a corner. You miss the tick like a child misses a nightlight. When you release the pendulum, the first click lands like a teacher entering the classroom with a stack of copybooks. Yes, yes, page 1, line 1, breathe. Third joke, because you promised yourself to keep things light. If anyone asks, you're in a very serious relationship with a small wooden pyramid and it's going great. Steady rhythm, low maintenance, excellent boundaries. Your grin fades into a yawn you barely finish before the tock collects it and files it under progress. You try the old musician's trick, count 1 on every tick and 2 on every tock, never getting to 3. It's silly. It's perfect. You never reach 3 because your attention slides away like a dozing book slipping down a blanket in the fuzzy margin before sleep. You remember a review of the 1881 International Electrical Exhibition, where a journalist swore the dynamo's hum made him drowsy. You imagine a hall of engines ticking, a city of lungs exhaling together, a future where bedrooms hum with softer, safer currents than gas and quieter clocks than this. Then, more kindly, you stop imagining. You lower the metronome's lid a fraction to mute the brightness of its click. Now it sounds as if it's ticking from inside a pocket in time. Your pocket watch under the pillow keeps its secret whisper. The 2 rhythms close enough to braid. Your breath follows the rope they make. The bed floats. Your thoughts obey the harbour master and moor to a post labelled enough. Before the door of sleep swings shut, one last peculiar fact taps for admission. Some manuals suggested aligning the metronome with your heart's side, left for most, so the vibrations travel more directly through the mattress and ribs. You slide the box an inch, feel a barely there resonance in your chest like a courteous knock from the inside. Maybe that's nonsense. Maybe it's physics scaled to human hope. Historians still debate whether a century of gadgets gave people rest or simply the feeling of trying, which sometimes is half the cure. You accept the uncertainty as you accept the tick. Regular, patient, indifferent to bravado. Tick. Your breath gathers. Tock. Your breath releases. The weight on the pendulum sits exactly where you left it. Fusing drama. Outside, the street dozes. Inside, the small wooden box keeps time so you don't have to. The lid's edge glows with a sliver of lamp memory, and your eyelids, conspirators, lower to match. the last thing you know is the neatness of it all. A universe arguing chaos. And here you are, curled around a borrowed rhythm, with sleep approaching on soft shoes, on schedule. The kitchen is a twilight of blue china and brass, the sort of room where spoons seem to nap in their own reflections. You pad across cool tiles, still carrying the faint drumbeat of last night's clockwork tick in your chest, and a ghost of gaslight hiss in your ears. The kettle murmurs, a polite cousin to the lamp, and you set out the ingredients for tonight's cure with the solemnity of a stagehand before a matinee. A jug of milk, a tin of mustard powder, a thumb of sugar, a nutmeg for shaving, and a little saucepan with a mouth like a yawn. You've been told by an aunt who swears on her quilting hoop that warm milk laced with mustard and a dusting of sugar will coax your eyelids down like a pair of velvet curtains. You decide to believe her, at least until the spoon disagrees. The milk rises slow as breath while you pinch a quarter teaspoon of ground mustard, bright as trapped sunlight. It smells like the word awake, which is ironic for a nightcap. You whisk, and the surface frets, then smooths. A few grains of sugar slip in like conspirators. The first taste is bewildered, creamy comfort colliding with a garden slap. You adjust the sugar, promise your tongue you will not use it as the battlefield again, and tilt the saucepan until the draught finds your cup. Steam threads your face. Your hands cradle the heat as if it were a small animal you'd like to tame. Victorians loved possets, milk warmed with ale or wine, thickened with egg, spiced with nutmeg, administered to the yawning and the ill with equal ceremony. Somewhere along the way, mustard, that household thunderbolt, sidled into bedtime. A mustard plaster could pull warmth through a winter chest. A mustard foot bath could convince cold toes that life was worth attending. A mustard milk, people claimed, could tease the circulation toward a drowsy shore. Historians still debate whether the benefit lived in chemistry, mild vasodilation soothing jittery nerves, or in choreography, kettle, whisk, the domestic spell that tells the body it's safe to surrender. You sip again, slower. The heat walks down your throat in stocking feet. The mustard pricks the border of your tongue and then shakes hands, suddenly civilized. You lean on the counter and watch the window darken fully. City sounds toned down to silhouettes. A cart's last rattle, a door latch learning whisper. In the far corner sits the tin of nutmeg, and you grate the smallest snow over the cup because every bedtime deserves weather. The scent is Christmas time and custody of secrets. Joke 1, if Santa drank this, he'd sleep in and miss all the chimneys. A legitimate moment flickers across the stovetop. In 1875, the Sale of Food and Drugs Act tightened the leash on adulteration in Britain. Chalk in flour, water in milk, copper, salts in pickles to impress the eye. Milk especially had lived a scandalous life. Stretched with pond and whitened with powders, the act didn't end the mischief overnight, but it did put a clerk's lamp on it. You glance at your jug, honest cream line glowing at the neck, and feel a little swell of relief. Whatever this potion does to your dreams, at least it won't be assisted by chalk dust. Historians still debate whether the fear of adulteration nudged households toward home remedies they could witness simmering. Each ingredient known and named. Tonight, the transparency is part of the lullaby. Quirky lore accumulates wherever kitchens exhale. Some swear by stirring clockwise to invite sleep and counterclockwise to banish nightmares. Some tuck a mustard seed into a scrap of muslin and tie it to the cup handle. For courage. You test the clockwise theory because it costs nothing and looks charming. The surface twirls, the steam ribbon curls like a cat's tail around your wrist. Remember your hot pillow idea? It still lounges on your bed, plump with dried hops and hope. You picture the two working in tandem, the hop's soft bitterness drifting down from above while the mustard's soft fire climbs from within, like two lanterns finding each other in fog. Another sip, and you notice the first yawn stretch like a friendly umbrella. Your shoulders loosen enough to ask for a chair. You carry the cup to the small table, where Mrs. Beaton's serious face on the Book of Household Management peeks from a stack of recipes. She would likely approve the orderliness, if not the spice. Nutmeg on milk she knows, mustard she'd file under energetic. You flip the book to a page on possets and read a line about soothing the system. You prefer the book's bossy tone at noon and its maternal one now. Joke 2, if a cookbook could tuck you in, this one would straighten the entire blanket universe. You catch yourself thinking of the 1858 Great Stink again. How the river taught the city to fear what could not be seen. Night air, bad airs, effluvia, Such useful words for unpinned unease. Warm milk, by contrast, is bounded, observable. It scolds if you ask too much. It smiles if you ask just enough. The mustard's role, you decide, is stage management. Keep blood circulating in the quiet theatre, so the actors, muscles, thoughts, don't wander off with their costumes. Historians still debate whether warm milk works because of tryptophan, because of childhood association, or because it makes you stop and hold something kindly for long enough. Remember, you are a creature and not a coal furnace. You vote for all of the above and take another slow mouthful. A neighbour coughs twice through the wall, the polite Morse code of city living, and then the building goes peacefully blank. You slide your heels against the tiles, grateful for their cool counsel. Another odd tip surfaces from a clipping you saved. Slip mustard into socks for 10 minutes before bed to ensure rosy feet, then remove and elevate. You tried it once, your toes felt like gossip. You prefer the cup. Joke 3, if your socks smell like a ploughman's lunch, your dreams may come with pickles. Legitimate history returns with a softer thread in the 1860s. Louis Pasteur's work on fermentation began to persuade the world that invisible organisms, not bad morals or mysterious airs, spoiled food and sickened families. Pasteurization would only later be common, but the idea that milk could be made safer by careful heat started travelling from lab bench to kitchen. Here you are, warming yours with intention, pretending to be a tiny scientist and a kindly aunt at once. The surface quivers and settles. Your pulse, once a squirrel on a tea tray, climbs into a pocket and goes still. The ritual lengthens your exhale. You lay your forearm on the table, the wood knows your temperature and forgives it. The cup empties at a civilized pace. You rinse the saucepan, set it upside down to dry, and kiss the flame on the stove with a turn of the wrist. The room's darkness steps forward. Not threatening way, only present, as if it has been waiting its turn like a guest with better manners than yours. You carry the last quarter of the drink toward the bedroom, passing the diadem's velvet box, the clockwork regulator's neat triangle, the gas tap with its small brass grin, a parade of cures like saints on a narrow shelf. In bed, the sheets hold the cool side for you as if they rehearsed it. You sip the final mouthful, sweet, peppery, familiar now, and set the cup on the nightstand. Breath in, not the metronome's command, but a cousin to it. The rhythm the milk suggested rather than enforced. Breath out, shoulders lowering, thumbs relaxing, jaw unknotting. Sleep feels closer, less a negotiation than a bus you've decided to board without arguing the fare. Before the last thoughts turn into lint, a curiosity wanders through. Sailors once swore a pinch of mustard in grog warmed them faster than wool, and blacksmiths ended long days with milk to cool the forge within. Perhaps the aunties married those ideas and made a nightcap for the modern, indoor worker whose forge is in the skull. Historians still debate whether your century's busyness created new insomnias or merely taught people to name the old ones with sharper pencils. You let the question drift to the bedside like a shawl you might use if you wake. The room breathes. The hot pillow waits under your cheek. Your feet warm inside the blanket's tunneled weather. The cup cools into a remembered kindness, somewhere outside. A wheel taps once like a polite metronome and then falls silent, as if bowing to the new foreman in your chest. You turn onto your side, let your hands find their old address, and invite the mustard's ember to glow without show, to turn the night from a problem into a place. You flatten your palm against the mattress and it answers with a soft whoof, the sigh of a creature that prefers to keep secrets. Tonight's worry is not electricity or ether or mustard, it's feathers, specifically the down-stuffed and cloud-puffy monument under your ribs, which every pamphlet disputes like a parliament of pillows. Your aunt insists a feather bed is a mother's embrace. Your landlady whispers it's a smotherer in lace gloves. You negotiate by lying very still, as if the mattress were a large bird you don't want to startle. There's a ritual. You pull the sheets back and give the bed a few prim pats, then a series of serious punches, as housemaids do at dawn in a dozen townhouses. Thwump, thwump, until the feathers churn and rise like fog in an autumn field. The air fills with a dusty tickle that your nose files under, attic with opinions. The smell is not unpleasant, exactly, warm, animal, faintly of soap from last week's airing, but the weight is startling. When you lie down, it gathers itself around you as if the bed has a soft plan. You remember last night's metronome and wonder whether sleep has tempo or topography. This one is all hills and hollows, and you have to choose a valley and mean it. Feather beds are old money. They've floated royals and peasants, cradle to grave, with only the occasional interlude of straw, but in the 19th century they became suspects. The new gospel of ventilation did not appreciate the way feathers trapped warmth, and rumour said, morbific secretions, a phrase that sounds like a villain in a penny dreadful. Enter a legitimate voice. In 1859, Florence Nightingale published her Notes on Nursing, the book that turned common sense into marching orders. Among its convictions, heavy feather bedding stifles breath and steals freshness from a sick room. Air must move, bodies must not be pressed by their own comfort. Historians still debate whether her pronouncements changed middle-class bedrooms overnight or merely stirred a long simmering stew of anxieties, but the tone of the conversation sharpened like a well-ironed collar. You adjust your hop pillow, remember that old friend, so its Herbie's sigh floats near your mouth, a hedgerow in a miniature. The feather sea under you receives the hop's scent, tames it a little, and returns it as something closer to clean hay. You turn once, then again, and watch your shape stay printed in the bed like a snow angel with second thoughts. That's the problem. The pamphleteers warn. Softness that hugs too hard encourages congestion and languor. Two words that always arrive wearing capes. You picture your blood trying to climb a feathery dune and giving up to write you a complaint. Joke 1. It begins, dear management. The terrain is too plush. The quirky housekeeping law is a parade with feather dusters at the front. On washing day, mattresses are hauled to windows and flung across sills like lazy seals to bask in sun. In some streets it looks as if the houses are sticking their tongues out. Maids beat the ticking with switchy wands of willow. A rhythmic drumming that could score a march. Bedding is sunned and aired. Two verbs that feel like good manners for fabric. You've seen ladies pick feathers out of the air like thoughts they weren't ready to have. One pocket guide recommends sprinkling mattresses with a mixture of lavender and benzoin tincture. Before beating, sweetness for the conscience, chemistry for the nose. Another warns sternly against leaving a featherbed damp, lest it breed evils, which is the kind of sentence that makes you tuck in your elbows. There is, too, the terror of the featherbed smother. Stories glide through neighbourhoods like shadows. Infants sinking, invalids vanishing into pillowy caves. A widow who slept with the casement shut and never woke in the same mood again. You file these under folklore, but you also notice how your breath travels differently when you're this swaddled. Your chest rises and the feathers come with it. Obedient, but a beat late, like a dance partner who isn't sure where your feet live. You crack the window 2 fingers again, betraying your landlady's campaign against night air, and feel a cool thread stitched through the room. The bed complains with a soft creak and then forgives you. History arrives bearing springs. By the 1860s and 70s, patents multiply for wire supports and spiral mattresses, clever lattices meant to push back where feathers only sighed. The combination, springs below, a thinner feather tick above, promised support and softness without the avalanche effect. Shops displayed the new contraptions like musical instruments. Some even invited customers to sit and bounce, which must have been hilarious in top hats. Legitimate landmark flickers. In 1865, the London firm of Cartwright and Warner advertised improved spring beds for hospitals, and the idea of a flat, airy, easily cleaned surface became fashionable medicine. Historians still debate whether the Spring Revolution truly addressed health concerns or mainly marketed modernity. What's clear is that sleeping on metal suddenly felt like progress, provided you could still afford a little cloud on top. You're loyal to your old feather seat tonight, partly out of habit and partly because hope has many costumes. You shift to your side, let your shoulder carve a berth, and think about posture, that Victorian idol. Doctors wrote prim essays about spines as if they were violins. Keep the instrument straight, the music will be true. Soft beds were accused of bending the bow. In a moment of domestic theatre, you try flattening your back, then your side, then your stomach, until you resemble a selection of anatomical drawings with bad captions. The mattress erases your experiments, restoring you to nesting bird. A memory lifts from the pages of a household manual. Turn the mattress weakly, plump the edges, never neglect the corners. Neglected corners, apparently, breed mischief. You picture small conspiracies of quills edging toward each other, like townspeople planning a fete. Joke 2. The fete serves seed cake and nobody shows up because the guests are already in the cake. You have plumped, you have turned, The bed, grateful, offers you a deeper hollow, and you slide into it as into a warm sentence. Consider, too, the social temperature of the thing. A plump feather bed signals prosperity. A thin straw pallet whispers cautionary tales. Being seen beating a mattress in the sun is both cleanliness and performance. We possess enough to freshen, but fashion turns. And suddenly, health is the more fashionable possession. Magazines start frowning at frowsy bedding and praising hard-hair mattresses for summer. Hair meaning horse. People swear by their cousins in the cavalry, never slept better than on a roll of horsehair. They say, which is exactly the sort of testimonial you promise never to test literally. You remain Switzerland, neutral between goose and mare, while the hop pillow votes goose with herbal enthusiasm. You pay a little attention to sound. Feather beds are not silent. They murmur when you move, a faint rustle like leaves gossiping. The noise, if you let it, can pull you back to a remembered hedgerow or the inside of a winter coat. Your breath meets the rustle and slows. The room's other noises tuck their chins, a cart, a cough, the night's spoon stirring its own darkness. You toy with the idea of placing your metronome on the nightstand again, but decide the feather rustle is enough rhythm. A softer click written in fluff. Quirky practice number 2. Some households stitch tiny sachets of dried mint into the ticking to discourage pests and encourage pleasant dreams. Pests, unspecified, were the bogeymen of bedding before microscopes taught everyone their middle names. You've never seen anything alarming, though you have met an enterprising moth. You run a hand along the seam, half expecting it to purr. Instead, your fingers return with a single wayward quill, which you examine like an archaeologist with a very friendly fossil. Joke 3. You award the quill a medal for service to coziness and retire it with honours to the waste bin. Your eyes grow heavier, which you cautiously attribute to the combined ministry of cool air, careful plumping, and the memory of mustard milk. A slow lesson emerges. Sometimes you don't need a new cure, but a kinder arrangement of the same old world. You position your knees so the bed's hollow becomes hammock rather than sinkhole. A small geometry that your hips applaud. You place one hand on the coverlet so the skin can converse with the fabric, and the fabric can reply. Present. Before you drift, one last legitimate image, a hospital ward in the 1860s with windows high and wide, iron bedsteads in rows, linen sun-white, feathers banished in favour of objects that could be scalded and scrubbed. Nightingale's shadow passes between the beds, a lantern and a ledger in hand. Her reforms did not reach every bedroom, but they reached yours by rumour and resolve. Historians still debate whether domestic life followed hospital logic or stubbornly cherished its comforts until fashions bullied them out. You are, at this minute, an experiment in coexistence, a feather bed with a window cracked, a hop pillow singing, a mind that has agreed to be carried rather than to carry. The mattress, sensing your truce, rises minutely to meet your ribs. The feathers around your shoulders become a shawl. The cool thread from the window sews a hem along the edge of the blanket and knots it neatly, somewhere. The hop and the goose strike a quiet bargain. Somewhere else, the metronome retires, satisfied that Russell can do tonight's counting. Your eyelids follow the rustle to its nest. If a dream comes, let it be of meadows, not miasmas, of air that moves and beds that learn your shape without demanding your soul. You choose the valley and mean it. The bed, large bird, tucks its head under its wing and waits. You drift from the feather sea to the parlour, where the wallpaper has stopped imitating flowers and started imitating good behaviour. The clock in the hall coughs up a quarter hour. You answer by lighting a smaller lamp. Not the hissing gas tap tonight, just an oil flame that behaves like a well-bred ember. On the sideboard waits a family of little bottles. Amber, cobalt clear, labels curled, corks patient. This is where the city keeps its lullabies. Laudanum, cordial, soothing syrup. Pectoral drops, remedies that promise to comb the tangles out of both pain and dreams. Your hot pillow can hum back up. This is the main vocalist's entrance. You know the drill. The teaspoon is polished, its bowl ringed with tiny graduations someone swore were 8 minims each. Quirky fact, special medicine spoons show up in catalogues, double-ended like tiny dumbbells, because Victorians finally admitted ordinary spoons are chaos with handles. You hold the laudanum bottle up to the lamp, the colour like tea the sun forgot, opium dissolved in alcohol, bitter as a lecture, fast as a rumour. Compared to last week's lettuce opium, this is the parent that doesn't do nicknames. It has a smell of pantry and pharmacy and a daring note of, "Are you sure?" A memory leaf's open. You once saw a chemist draw laudanum with a glass pipette, counting drops into a vial while the bell above the shop door tapped time. Tiny, precise rain. He warned about dose by the minim, not the mood. Still, household bottles wander into parlours and bedtime cabinets because life is a wool coat full of burrs, neuralgia, cough, grief, the problem of nerves, and laudanum promises to snip most of them for a few hours. Historians still debate whether easy access softened needless suffering or disguised it long enough to multiply, whether the sleeping quiet purchased was net mercy or a bill that arrived with compound interest. You tip 10 drops into a finger of water, brown streamers curling like ink in a letter that prefers to be incomprehensible, and take it in 2 small swallows. The taste is bitter, then briefly sweet the way memory is sweet when it's nearly over. You set the glass down, your tongue writes to management about bitterness violations, and is told to take it up with the poppy. Joke 1, somewhere a sugar cube files for hazard pay. The warmth rolls out at once, a quiet brass band marching down your sternum, tubas considerate, drums muffled. You lay a palm flat over your ribs to greet the band as it passes. Across the sideboard, more names wink. There's Dover's powder, opium and ipecac, marketed for colds and sweating out fevers. There's Bateman's pectoral drops for colic and gripes, Godfrey's cordial with its treacle-kissed opium, and the celebrity scandal of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, whose morphine calmed teething babies into sermonic silence. You once babysat a neighbour's infant who slept with the unnerving dedication of a monk. Later you learned the bottle's recipe and sat very awake indeed. A legitimate literary moment tiptoes and wearing slippers. 1821, Thomas de Quincey publishes Confessions of an English Opium Eater, giving the island a moody mirror and the apothecary a sales bump. His dreams were cathedrals and coastlines. Yours currently look like a chair you keep forgetting to stand up from. The parlour air tastes faintly of orange peel. Last night's tea lingering like a guest who has mastered the art of not leaving. You crack the window a polite inch. Your landlady's campaign against night air remains vigorous. Your campaign for air that has actually met outdoors remains undefeated. The laudanum begins its gentle thunder. Not the fireworks of ether, not the hummingbird fuss of electricity, not the mustard's hearth glow. This is a soft hand on the back of the neck, thumb tracing the constellation of worry stars you've been charting since breakfast. Your metronome is still silent in the bedroom, but its lesson remains. Even thunder can be counted. On the mantel sits a small cobalt bottle cut with ridges, the universal sign for poison: do not drink by accident during dim lighting or lively conversation. You like the honesty of it. The way the glass itself raises its hand and says, "No, thank you." Quirky aside, blue and ribbed bottles became a tactile alarm for nighttime dosing, a kindness to sleepy eyes and careless fingers. You consider the plain truth embedded in these props. The century learned to codify danger because it kept inviting danger to supper. Then a newspaper clipping in your head unfolds itself. The 1868 Pharmacy Act again. Yes, the one your apothecary loves to quote, ink all over his fingers, noting that poisons like opiates belong behind counters, in ledgers, in hands that answer to a guild. That was Britain's stitch. Across the Atlantic, the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act will later put labels in plainer speech. Tonight, you're in the in-between, when a label's flourish can outtalk its contents and the shopman's wink is a form of punctuation. Historians still debate whether regulation chased harm usefully, or simply taught a marketplace fluent in loopholes to conjugate new tenses of cure. Your body begins to edit itself. Edges soften. Elbows become less opinionated. The parade of tasks scheduled for tomorrow strolls by in their shirt sleeves and waves kindly instead of shouting orders. The hot pillow gets jealous and leans in with a punctuation of bitter flowers. Gaslight hiss from 2 nights ago wanders in as a remembered soundtrack. But tonight the room prefers the hush between breaths, the way wood thinks to itself. You laugh once, very small, at the thought that you have built a whole orchestra over the week. Iron, electricity, vapour, clockwork, kitchen, feathers, and now you've hired a conductor who insists on pianissimo. You think of a true milestone near the century's end in 1898 over in Germany. Bayer will market diacetyl morphine as heroin, a name so confident it might tip its hat. It will be sold as a cough sedative, kind to throats, non-addictive. The way a new umbrella promises a kinder rain. Before that, in 1874, an English chemist, C. R. Alderwright, prepared the compound in a lab curiosity sort of way. Your present laudanum is plainer, older, stickier with history, but you can feel the road rising, the household bottle walking slowly toward the laboratory label. Historians still debate whether the modern badge of scientific softened caution or sharpened it. You suspect it did both. Depending on which room you're sitting in and who is coughing, another nurse's whisper shuffles in. Ice on the brow, warm feet, cool room, quiet talk. You've done 3 of those, the 4th is optional when talking to yourself counts. The laudanum turns down the gain on your senses. The clink on the street sounds padded. The lamp's flame is a quieter geometry. Even your heartbeat seems to be keeping polite hours. Joke 2. Your inner squirrel has traded the tea tray for a chaise lounge and is leafing through a tasteful magazine. A tiny, practical caution survives the hush. You count back your drops and imagine the ledger, the one doctors kept when ladies and gentlemen took their rest, with a little help too often and mornings grew cottony. De Quincey's shadow lifts a finger. The diary of that starched aunt who swore by mustard milk frowns fondly from the bookcase. You answer both with a nod and a glass of water. The poppy will keep its promises, but you aren't signing any lifetime contracts. Your eyelids grow persuasive. You blow out the lamp. The wick gives a last orange punctuation like a foxtail vanishing into the hedge. In the unlit parlour, the window's inch becomes a tune, a cool draft that says bedtime in syllables your body recognises without translation. You carry the quiet down the short corridor, your hand grazing the wallpaper roses, still pretending, still well behaved. The feather bed receives you with its parishioner's sigh. You arrange the hop pillow like a hedgehog with opinions. You think briefly about your first night's lettuce opium. So gentle, so earnest, and smile at your own syllabus. Joke 3. If you pass this course, you're getting a diploma in yawning arts. One last thought floats up, as soft as the cotton under your cheek. What if all these bottles and belts and clocks are less cures than scripts? Rituals that stage the body into remembering an old role, the mammal who sleeps when it is dark and warm and unafraid. Historians still debate whether Victorian insomnia was a new disease of steam and schedule, or a renamed old ache amplified by brighter nights and louder clocks. You prefer the unscholarly answer you can feel right now, the hush that spreads like ink through water, the breath that lengthens like a road with no tolls, the way your mind puts down its pen and lets the sentence find its own ending. You turn onto your side, leave the window a sliver open, and let the poppy row your little boat along the black glass canal between waking and dream. The oar strokes slow, the waker raising itself politely. The hot pillow hums. The house sleeps in different languages, and somehow says the same thing. Your hand loosens. The shore is very near, and no one is calling your name. The sanatorium greets you like a very polite glacier. The hall smells of carbolic, wet linen, and an optimism so brisk it might have its own barometer. You're here to reset the machine, your machine, which lately has been 1 part hop pillow, 1 part metronome, and 1 part let's not discuss the laudanum. The walls wear motivational aphorisms about purity and vigour. The attendants wear sleeves you could bounce a coin off. A bell rings with military self-esteem. Your name is called. You're about to meet water in all its personalities. First, the sitz bath, an insultingly tidy porcelain throne filled to the equator with water that has opinions about your circulation. You lower yourself in with the caution of a cat testing a new religion. The attendant times you with a pocket watch, because this place believes that minutes are medicinal granules you can dissolve under your tongue. Cold water nips the edges of your willpower and then, surprisingly, quiets everything that was yammering. The room's muffled echoes take on a sleepable rhythm. You picture your old metronome in its walnut suit, nodding along from 7 miles away. Now the Scotch douche, the attendant announces, with the cheerful menace of someone about to demonstrate bagpipes incorrectly. The douche is a hose, and Scotch means alternating hot and cold in polite ambushes. The first cold hits like a crisp letter opener. The hot answers like a hand around a teacup, back and forth, arterial gym class. Your skin goes from gooseflesh to bloom and back again. Your thoughts, similarly, go from excuse me to fine, fine, fine. Joke 1. You've never felt more like a salad being responsibly dressed. Hydropathy, water cure, has been moving through the century like a determined river. In the 1820s and 30s, Vincenz Priesnitz at Greifenberg turned cold springs and strict routines into a pilgrimage for the nervous and notable. England caught the wave. Malvern's Dr. James Manby Gully refined it with tepid baths, wet sheet packs, and earnest lectures. A legitimate event splashes through. In 1849, Charles Darwin sought relief at Malvern, submitting to the schedule and the wet sheet chrysalis. He wrote home about the regimen with a mixture of hope and scepticism. Historians still debate whether the water itself healed or the removal from ordinary life did. Regular hours, graded walks, the blessed absence of urgent mail. Your turn for the wet sheet pack arrives. It begins like a magic trick. A large linen sheet soaked in cold water is wrung, snapped, and wrapped around you with astonishing hospitality, followed by blankets, then more blankets, until you resemble a roll of moral fibre. The first minute is a surprise attack. The second minute is a negotiation. The third minute you feel the cold warming under your own furnace until the whole arrangement becomes a temperate cocoon. The attendant tucks the edge like a grandmother and leaves you with instructions to think calm thoughts and avoid self-pity. This place has a strict anti-self-pity policy, which is frankly rude to insomniacs. Inside the pack, time thins into something you can fold. Your racing mind, the one that kept inventorying mustard tins and counting gas hisses, runs out of errands. Breath arrives in long, even threads. Somewhere, a patient coughs and is answered by an echo of hallway linoleum. You remember your feather bed and how it tried to swaddle you into oblivion. This is swaddling with a thesis statement. Historians still debate whether wet sheet packs lowered fevers and calmed nerves through clever heat exchange or through uncomplicated sensory overwhelm. So much steady pressure that the inner clamour finally gives up and sits in the corner with a biscuit. A bell rings again, attendants unroll you like a map and guide you toward a brisk rub-down called the friction, linen mitts, brisk circulars, cheeks you didn't know could glow, then a glass of water, of course taken in a sunny corridor where pot ferns look like they're doing calisthenics. Quirky house rule, you're to drink by the clock, not the thirst, because thirst is apparently a deceitful butler. They hand you a printed chart, 8 glasses between waking and dusk. With a stern note about temperature, you sign with the obedience of a schoolchild who already ate the chalk. The afternoon features graded walking on the sanatorium grounds, which turns out to be a gentle parade of patients across lawns, trimmed with military precision. Bahia plaques along the paths announce distances like Conker's, quarter-mile promenade, half-mile circuit, the courageous mile. You do a half-mile and pretend it's an expedition, because everyone here pretends that the air is clean enough to make you suspicious, and the shade is arranged with the choreography of a Baroque dance. The rest hut tastes of varnish and approved boredom. Joke 2. Somewhere a hot pillow is writing you to say it misses your head and suspects these ferns are a bad influence. A notice board lists tomorrow's regimen: early rising, dry brushing, a 2-minute plunge, breakfast free of stimulating condiments, rest hour, noon douche, quiet reading, non-fiction preferred. Lights out at 10 sharp. You let the words lights out land like a velvet mallet. Every cure so far has been a conversation. This one is a schedule that insists on being a verb. You wonder whether a century that learned to worship the clock can only surrender to sleep by bowing to a bigger one. Historians still debate whether the sanatorium's tyranny of routine heals the nerves or merely distracts them. Whether the real medicine is the absence of work, worry and midnight gas flame. In the communal dining room, porridge develops character. The tableware is heavy enough to enforce good posture. The conversation is politely uninteresting. Coffee is discouraged. Tea is only grudgingly admitted. Meat appears like a once-a-week comet. The superintendent lectures on hygienic sleep, emphasizing cool rooms, open windows, and mattresses that refuse to swallow the sleeper whole. Florence Nightingale would approve. You try not to think about your feather bed at home curling its lip. A therapist of the mind patrols the tables with encouraging nods, because suggestion is considered nearly as medicinal as baths. The idea is to be gently surrounded by competence until your personal chaos is too embarrassed to continue. Evening returns you to the bathhouse for a neutral bath, not cold, not hot, a long soak at body temperature, designed to persuade your nervous system that absolutely nothing startling will happen for a while. The water feels like a missing layer of skin, the wheeling breathes in pale tiles, the attendant's steps click a metronome you didn't ask for but accept. You remember the night you timed your breath to a clockwork tick, how the world shrank to inhale, exhale, and the mattress learned not to argue. This is that lesson in liquid. You let your limbs lengthen like long, sleepy thoughts, and imagine your spine saying thank you in very small italics. Quirky aside, one sanatorium manual recommends dew walking, barefoot strolls on morning grass to harden the system and improve sleep by evening. You picture yourself tiptoeing across a lawn like a cautious heron, your feet writing tiny cold poems, and decide you will attempt it exactly once and tell absolutely everyone if it works. Another rite prescribes wet girdles, a damp cloth wrapped around the abdomen under a dry one, worn for hours to tone digestion and somehow dreams. You promise your dignity you'll consider it later. Back in your assigned room, the window is locked obligingly open. The bed is an iron frame that looks like it pays taxes early. The mattress is horsehair, firm as a moral. A nurse checks the drafts with a practiced hand and frowns at the hint of stuffiness and adjusts the sash another half-inch. You think of your landlady's sermons against night air and smile, respectfully at a distance. A small card on the nightstand reads "No reading in bed," which is a personal attack but perhaps a fair one. You put the card face down because you are not a coward, just sleepy. The bell rings, lights out at 10. There is, blessedly, no gas hiss, no oil wicks, foxtail, farewell. Darkness arrives like a professional. You line your breath up with the echo of the neutral bath, the sitz's quiet shock, the damp linen's steady pressure, your body, which has been cataloguing miracles all week, iron tonics, ether kisses, the poppy's hush, clockwork ticks, mustard warmth, feather rustle, now adds water's lesson, temperature as sentence length, pressure as punctuation, routine as paragraph. Joke 3. If you dream tonight, may it be about being chosen as employee of the month by a very proud bathtub. You slip towards sleep with an unfamiliar feeling, not conquest, not collapse, but compliance, the kind you give a wise old map. The building rests in chorus, 2 coughs, a page turning, a hush as long as a hallway. Somewhere downstairs a night nurse writes in a ledger. The nibs scratch orderly as rain. You think of Priesnitz and Malvern, and of people who drag their nerves across continents to be told to drink water and walk by the clock. You consider Battle Creek across the ocean, where, before long, a doctor named Kellogg will turn routine into a brand and mornings into slogans. Historians still debate whether the zeal was a kindness or a costume. You yawn, you choose kindness. The iron bed, stern and fair, holds you level as a promise. The open window lets the dark in like a mild companion. Your thoughts, scrubbed and towel-warmed, step into their nightshirts without complaint. When sleep comes, it takes you not by storm but by schedule, stamped approved in neat blue ink. Tonight you're promoted to a very odd throne, a reclining chair, framed in walnut, with a horseshoe magnet arched over the headrest like a velvet halo, and a crown of tiny bells suspended from a slender rod that trembles when you breathe. The attendant, half butler, half wizard, asks you to remove metal hairpins, then positions your head under the magnet so the north points toward your crown like a compass that has made up its mind about you. He winds a clockwork hidden in the stand. The bells answer with a breathy shimmer, not a clamour, more like tea steam remembering how to sing. You have sampled poppies, clocks, vapours and bathtubs. Tonight it's magnets above, harmonics around, and your nerves invited to stop pretending they're birds that must dash themselves against windows. The theory arrives softly. Your sleeplessness is a deficit of animal electricity, a phrase Victorians borrowed from the 1780s when Luigi Galvani touched frog legs with metal and watched them kick like startled dancers. In this chair, the story goes, the magnet's field will coax your own currents into marching order, and the bells, tuned to a gentle chord, will nudge breath and pulse toward a calmer tempo. The attendant demonstrates how the bells hush when he steadies the rod with 2 fingers. When he lets go, they breathe again, as if your exhale has become a sound you can touch. Historians still debate whether any of this affects anything beyond mood, but right now your mood is the thing pacing the room, and it looks willing to sit. A legitimate lightning bolt of history glows in the corner. 1831, Michael Faraday discovers electromagnetic induction at the Royal Institution, change a magnetic field, conjure a current, and with that, the century learns that invisible forces can move and make and hum, the way people sat up straighter at those lectures. You like to think the inventor of your bedtime throne took a souvenir thrill from a Christmas demonstration and repurposed it for insomniacs, swapping sparks for lullabies, Faraday would probably raise an eyebrow. You raise your hopes and call it even. The attendant places a flat magnet under the cushion at your spine, a current sandwich, he calls it, and shows you a small brass knob that can be turned to bring the bells nearer or farther until the cord sits exactly in the air above your face. The pitches are modest, a triad that doesn't argue. You've never considered yourself a chord, but your ribs approve, expanding on the downbeat and folding on the release. Joke 1. You decide that if you start snoring in tune, you'll charge admission and tell the landlady it's chamber music. The chair reminds you, in a sideways way, of the pulver marker chains you saw in a shop window. Flexible little batteries people wore like costume jewellery when they wanted their joints electrified and their reputations modern. Your bell device is less portable and more theatrical. It wants room, silence, belief. The attendant dims the gaslight until the mantle is a pale seashell. He calls this stimulus control. Though he pronounces it like a sermon, you think of the sanatorium's schedules and nod. Your body has been collecting permissions all week, and this one reads, "You may now be a tuning fork." A quirky fact floats down with the shimmer. Certain magnetic mattresses were advertised to align the sleeper with the Earth's field, heads north, feet south, lest dreams wander off the map. Some households fixed compass roses to bed frames the way sailors tattoo anchors to forearms. Others placed lodestones in pillow corners as if sleep were iron filings liable to scatter. You briefly consider stitching a tiny compass into your hot pillow, then decide it already has enough opinions. Joke 2. If your pillow starts pointing north in the middle of the night, that's your cue to rotate, not to found a new expedition. The bells keep their shimmer reign at the edge of hearing. The magnet sits over you like a silent priest. The sensation is not dramatic, no tingles, no frog-leg theatrics, but there is a steadiness you didn't bring into the room. Breath in, bells float. Breath out, bells settle. You imagine iron in your blood politely aligning, little filings smoothing their jackets and standing in rows. Is that how physiology works? Probably not. But you remember how your metronome asked nothing more than obedience to a tick, and how the neutral bath offered the slow grammar of nothing happens now, and you think, ritual is a kind of field too. Another thread of history hums through. In 1845, Faraday names diamagnetism, noticing that some materials, bismuth for example, repel magnetic fields rather than embrace them. The newspapers simplified and declared it a wonder. Not all things submit to the magnet's will. You tuck that next to the memory of nights when every remedy slid off your nerves like rain off polished stone. Historians still debate whether Victorians understood these distinctions enough to matter in clinics and halls and parlours. What mattered, most nights, was whether anyone had the patience to sit with you while you tried another hinge in the door to sleep. The attendant adjusts the bell frame so one tiny chime hovers near your left ear, another by your right, the third above your forehead, an isosceles of hush. He demonstrates a gentle brush of the rod that sets the bells singing for a precise count of 60, then rest. Sustained, then silence, he says, as if announcing a dance figure. You let the first minute ring and decay and ring again, and somewhere in the second cycle your jaw joins the experiment, unknotting with the same soft give the sound has. The gas mantle, faint and respectful, throws a small halo against the ceiling like a coin that refuses to stop shining. Quirky aside, some parlours kept a harmonicon, a tabletop glass organ played with moistened fingers, to calm hysterical palpitations. Another favourite was the Aeolian harp, placed in an open window to let the wind strum a voiceless chord while you do nothing but be serenaded by physics. Your device steals from both without requiring either wet hands or wind, just the trembling fineness of brass and patience. You decide, not for the first time, that every cure is a culture, clocks, kitchens, baths, bells, each with its etiquette and its nouns. You shift, carefully remembering feathers and their smothering diplomacy, and find the magnet's arch with the crown of your head again. The attendant smiles. He has trained half the neighbourhood to find north like migrating birds. You picture your mustard milk warming on a phantom stove, your laudanum bottle sulking handsomely in a drawer, your metronome practising humility in its box. They're all here as ghosts, watching bells do what bells do. Joke 3. If Remedies had a talent show, your bells would lose to the hot pillow's interpretive dance, but only by a whisker. You ask, because curiosity rides shotgun with fatigue, whether anyone has proven bells and magnets can hush a fretful brain. The attendant replies in the language of the era, case histories, testimonies and improved complexions. rest of the deepest and most consoling kind. Historians still debate whether magnetism, as administered at home, did more than consecrate a quiet hour with no letters and no arguments, and whether harmonics merely licensed you to listen to something kinder than your own head. You're oddly fine with that. The best of your week's cures have been the ones that exchange certainty for rhythms you could ride. A final legitimate note slips in as the bells soften. Across the Atlantic, in the 1850s, a patent flurry for magneto-electric machines turned cranks into therapy. Davis and Kidder sold little boxes that made hands tingle and optimism vibrate. Yours is the gentle cousin, the after-hours edition designed not to awaken but to lull, to replace cranking with ringing, and treat insomnia not as a sin but as a signal that the orchestra has lost its conductor. The hour gets round-shouldered, the bells drift farther apart, then closer. As your breath wanders and remembers, the magnet waits, indifferent, which is a relief after so many dramatic remedies begging for applause. You close your eyes, glad the room is mostly sound and shape and not argument. The glow on the ceiling steadies. Your hands forget their catalogue of tasks. The chair is suddenly less chair, more raft, pleasantly familiar territory by now, and you ride it toward the part of night that doesn't require commentary. When you stand, the bells barely stir. The attendant, a diplomat of hush, escorts you to the door and reminds you to sleep north-south if you can. You promise nothing and everything. Back in your room. The bed is just a bed again, allied with the hot pillow. Neutral about magnets. You slide under the coverlet, turn your face to the cool side, and carry the faint ringing with you like a pocket watch you don't need to consult. The city outside lowers its own bells. Carriages and cries replaced by tiresome silence, and you answer with the same, tuned to something you cannot see but can feel. A field, a chord, a willingness to stop standing. You make a treaty with your stomach before the clock strikes 10. No more theatrical suppers. No more stewed eels pretending to be lullabies. No more pastries that taste like a dare. Tonight the cure moves from bells and baths to butter knives and breadboards. You lay out a little parade on the kitchen table. Plain crackers, a heel of yesterday's loaf, a raw carrot scrubbed until it squeaks like a clean window, a thimble of bicarbonate tea in a saucer, and a jug with toast water steeping amber like weak tea. Your nerves have been loud, your digestion has been louder, and every pamphlet in the bookcase insists the two have been gossiping behind your back for years. First task. Tame the mouth. You break the cracker and let it sit on your tongue until it remembers what it's for. The body likes simple work with clear outcomes, and a dry biscuit is clarity incarnate. The carrot follows, crisp as a new linen. You chew until the clock forgets to hurry, somewhere. A reformer named Sylvester Graham smiles from the 1830s, scolding the era about rich sauces and late-night feasts and urging plain bread as moral arithmetic. Across the ocean, his sermons grew a biscuit. Across decades, that biscuit crosses your table with the dignity of something that outlived a sermon. Historians still debate whether Grahamite temperance cured actual insomnia or merely gave people a virtuous reason to be boring at supper. But your pulse, for once, seems willing to accept boredom as a lullaby. Your grandmother swore by toast water. A slice toasted nearly to study in the school of burnt, drowned in hot water, left to think about its choices, strained and sipped warm. You pour a small glass and test the thesis. It tastes like a memory of breakfast, which is better than a prophecy of heartburn. Joke 1. If chamomile is the librarian of bedtime drinks, toast water is the usher who whispers, "This way," and points to the quiet seats. You add the tiniest squeeze of lemon because your stomach appreciates polite brightness. Every household manual in reach insists that sleeplessness wears a false moustache called dyspepsia. Mrs. Beaton prints menus that taper gently toward bedtime. Medical pamphlets scold heavy meats after 6. Clergymen write essays on temperance in the evening table, with pastoral concern for souls and stomachs. A legitimate milestone sets out place cards. In 1847, the Vegetarian Society formed in England, turning meatless meals from eccentric habit into organised conviction. Its journals buzzed that simpler suppers soothe the night as well as the conscience. You aren't signing manifestos tonight, but the raw carrot gnaws less back than cold beef, and you like the sound of a conscience that doesn't argue after midnight. You examine the saucer of sodium bicarbonate, baking soda in its Sunday clothes. A pinch in water fizzes a little. A domestic thundercloud breaking up a sulk. Apothecaries prescribe it for acid stomach and, by extension, fretful lungs. You sip sparingly, the belch that follows is dignified, which is all anyone can ask after 10. Joke 2, if etiquette manuals covered burps, this one would earn a calling card. On the shelf waits charcoal biscuit. Yes. Actual charcoal baked into a tidy disc. The Victorian faith that vegetable charcoal can sponge up mischief. You nibble a corner. It tastes like a fireplace that learned manners. The hope is quaint. Mop the gut and the mind stops pacing upstairs. Your thoughts drift to mineral waters, those bottled pilgrimages. Vichy for alkalinity, Friedrichsthal for bitter efficiency, Apollinaris for sparkle. Hotels advertise them, invalids swear by them, dinner tables sprout siphons like tiny glass trees. You've tried a tumbler or two at parties where the conversation was mostly about the conversation. They felt like well-behaved thunderstorms. Historians still debate whether imported waters healed or simply civilized indigestion with labels and bubbles. But there's comfort in the ritual. A glass chosen, a slow sip, an hour untangled from larger appetites. Timing takes center stage. The sanatorium taught you bells and schedules. The kitchen teaches you intervals. 3 hours between the last bite and the pillow, pamphlets say, or else dreams will be recruited for digestion's night shift and show up late for their own work. You decide to be the boss who sends digestion home on time. The hot pillow upstairs approves from afar. Rustling like hedgerow applause, you hear the featherbed clear its throat about softness without supper, and you pretend not to notice. A quirky footnote from the back of a health almanac. Some Londoners swore by arrowroot jelly for bedtime, a translucent wobble of starch, sugar, and restraint. Others advocated beef tea, which manages to be both watery and aggressive. Like a bulldog with table manners, you ladle neither. Instead, you grate a whisper of nutmeg over the toast water. Remember the mustard milk night? Just enough for your nose to recall cosy without promising eggnog. In a cupboard waits a tin marked malt. You've heard of a new American invalid food? Malted milk, making its way across the Atlantic, praised for night nourishment that behaves. For now, your kitchen stays old country. Bread, water, patience. Legitimate event number 2 arrives with a label maker. The 1860s through 1880s see pepsin, an extracted digestive enzyme, bottled and sold in elegant script, promising to relieve weight and wakefulness after meals. Doctors sprinkle it on tongues, stir it into wines, and assure the nervous that chemistry can be kind. You tried pepsin once. It felt like bureaucracy in your stomach. Lots of stamping, no drama. Historians still debate whether these tonics helped the sleepless or mostly helped printers of handsome labels. Either way, the very idea that a meal could be made more bedtime-friendly was a lullaby of intent. You slice a second sliver of bread, toast it pale, and shave thin butter that melts like good news. Butter has been accused of much, but in the quantity you're using it's a footnote, not a headline. The knife makes tiny winter sounds against the crust. The kitchen's clock ticks with modest self-esteem. You arrange crackers and carrot coins for future you, who always thinks it wants something at 1 in the morning. When future you arrives, it can have a coin and go back to bed. Joke 3. You're opening a very exclusive night restaurant. Menu. Not now. Some of the strangest advice is also the calmest. A small guidebook suggests a single plain biscuit and a glass of warm water set by the bed, to be taken only if you wake with gnawing. Another recommends 4 almonds chewed slowly to occupy the mind usefully. There is even a line about celery, a stalk nibbled for its sedative reputation. Perhaps merely because it's crunchy water with ambitions. You line up almonds like small moons and decide their ambition is acceptable. Your mind, revered nuisance that it is, tries to reroute toward laudanum's cabinet and the bell chair's shimmer. You redirect it with the carrot's crunch and the toast water's hush. Historians still debate whether the Victorian dyspeptic neurosis was a real epidemic of stomachs or a poetic way to talk about lives pinned between factory whistles and moral sermons. Either way, a quiet, early, light supper is a rebellion that doesn't need a manifesto. You rinse the knife, set the plate in the rack, and listen to the city finish its chewing. Carts roll, shutters click. The last oyster seller offers the last oysters to people who won't sleep anyway. Upstairs, you leave the window cracked and the metronome closed. Tonight the rhythm can be the small, present percussion of breath, your stomach, soothed by its sensible staff meal. stops filing complaints. The hot pillow contributes a meadow clause. Somewhere the sanatorium's iron bed nods in bureaucratic approval. You have not performed a miracle, you have performed a menu. There's dignity in that. Before the light goes, one more true image. By the 1890s, a certain Midwestern breakfast cereal will promise easy digestion and restful nights. Turning grain into gospel and mornings into brands, you smile at the inevitability. Every century distills its anxieties into a food you can buy. You just now choose the version without a trademark. Crackers, carrot, water, patience, the slow exit from the kitchen like a bow. The bed receives you with less negotiation than usual. No drums, no thunderclaps, no vinegar battery. Your tongue tastes toast and nutmeg in the past tense. The belly that once felt like a small forge banked too high now hums like a bakery long after close, warmth without errands. You turn to the cool side, place an almond's promise on the nightstand, and let the quiet climb into the room the way steam leaves a kettle when it knows the cup is ready. You step out into a courtyard where the night looks polished, as if some cosmic housemaid has been up since dusk wiping fingerprints off the stars. The cure tonight is part zoology, part astronomy, and entirely a dare to your nerves. A moonlight walk with a borrowed hedgehog's luck in your pocket, and the sort of hope that only seems reasonable when the world is silver instead of sensible. You ease the gate, and the hinges answer with a secretive note. The street is gentler after 10, fewer wheels, more whispers, the gas lamps offering islands of domesticated starlight. You set off at a lazy sailor's pace, because every remedy you've tried lately, mustard milk, clockwork tick, magnet bells, has taught you that sleep likes a rhythm it can hum along to. Before the walk begins in earnest, the animal charm, in your palm rides a tiny token, a clipped quill from a hedgehog's back, acquired legally and kindly from the grocer who keeps a hedgehog in his cellar to discourage beetles with bad manners. He swears the creature is a better night watchman than any cat, and twice as polite. Superstition says a hedgehog's prickle, safely shed, never plucked, tucked into a pocket, turns back nightmares, the way the animal turns into a bristled comma when trouble reads the sentence wrong. You're aware this belongs more to folklore than pharmacy, but then again so did hot pillows until you slept like a small chapel on a quiet island. Joke 1. If this fails, you'll ask the hedgehog for a reference letter and pursue other opportunities. The air tastes clearer under the moon than it ever does under the lamp. Your landlady would fuss about night air, but Florence Nightingale's ghost would approve your open lungs and measured pace, so you let the nurse outrank the superstition for once. You keep to the Victorian Embankment, opened in 1870, a legitimate gift from the century, which turned stinking riverbanks into a promenade of trees, lamps, and purposeful stone. The moon loves the river. She keeps practicing her cursive on its surface. Families stroll earlier in the evening, but now it's just you and a policeman 2 islands of light away, and the occasional couple moving as if waltz steps could be learned in secret. You try a trick the sanatorium taught you. Walk the same length in the same time every night you can, as if your feet were training the rest of you to keep a promise. The moonlight helps, it slows the world without scolding it. Your breath thaws into longer sentences. The hedgehog's quill rides warm against your skin. You pass a patch of public garden where the shrubs look like someone's grandmother napping, and you remember the aeolian harps people put in windows for the wind to play. Last night's bells in a wilder key. The leaves perform a similar duty, whispering a rhythm that your metronome would approve. Animal cures make a little parade through your memory. Canary birds in mines, faithful barometers of danger, taught a century to respect soft throats, cats on laps, household doctors without diplomas, reduce heart rates simply by purring near them, double-stitching proof that vibration can be medicine. Rabbits' feet, though unkind to rabbits, hung from watch chains for luck. Some swore the luck helped sleep, and hedgehogs, those walking pincushions, were welcomed into pantries and gardens as pest control with a personality. One quirky house tip says to let a hedgehog meander the scullery at dusk, then return him to his box with a saucer of milk, though he prefers beetles, which sounds like the world's most honest menu. A high, chalk-pale moon climbs a thumb's width, the sort sailors and poets calibrate by habit. The word lunacy was not invented by Victorians, but they gave it fresh stationery. Writing anxious articles about full moons stirring hospitals and jails, you keep an eye on your own brain for any moon-provoked mischief and find only a softening at the edges. a willingness to let the river make its long promises without your help. Historians still debate whether moonlight walks cured insomnia or simply offered the two best medicines you can give a person for free: mild exercise and a reason to be somewhere that isn't your own head. You turn onto a quieter lane where the cobbles are the colour of pewter, a milk cart done for the night rests like a retired whale. Two cats negotiate property lines with the civility of diplomats at the end of a long conference. You lift the hedgehog quill to the light. Tiny architecture, fierce in miniature, and then put it back, aware you might look like a thief examining a hairpin. The charm is silly, but then again, so was stirring a clean nail in lemon juice for iron. So was strapping a battery to your eyebrows. Your century has a fondness for silly that occasionally pays dividends. A legitimate lunar memory shuffles in with its own lamp. On December 22nd, 1870, not long after this promenade opened, Londoners admired how the new riverside lights contended with the moon, each claiming proper custody of the night. The newspapers loved the spectacle. Artists sketched silhouettes of strollers who looked less haunted than the generation that trudged through the great stink. Street lamps stretched evening safely. The moon offered a gentler license. Your walk is exactly this inheritance. Light enough to be unafraid, dim enough to be drowsy. You reach a tiny square where a public fountain leans into its own sound. A stray dog drinks, then inspects you with the frankness of health inspectors. You offer a palm. He decides your paperwork is in order and wanders away. The fountain's cadence nudges your breath into fours. You remember the neutral bath's nothing happens now temperature and feel a watery cousin in your chest. Cool in, quieter wow. Joke 2, if your lungs had a librarian, she'd stamp tonight's breathing returned on time. The longer you walk, the more the mind's parade falls behind. Those insistent thoughts, laundry lists, invented arguments, imaginary rehearsals, lack good shoes. The street refuses to echo them. You think instead about other animal-adjacent cures that flirted with science. Beef tea for convalescence, cod liver oil for winter, calf's foot jelly trembling with medicinal self-importance. Some of it worked. Some of it worked because people slowed down to make it. Some of it was an excuse to be cared for. The hedgehog charm is squarely in the third category. A reminder in your pocket that something small and stubborn curls up against fear and says, "Try again tomorrow." Moonlight lays a path along a line of railings. You follow it as if it's a rule. Above, windows blink out one by one, like a polite neighbourhood bowing to the inevitable. You keep an eye on the time because timing matters if you get home too wired. The walk becomes a performance if you return with just enough gravity in your limbs. Bed will feel like a dock and you like a boat in no hurry. The hot pillow is waiting. The feather bed has been moderated by your new rule of open windows. The metronome can sleep off duty. You plan to put the hedgehog quill on the nightstand, a tiny pennant of truce. On the way back, a cloud slides over the moon and the street dims to a draft. Your step slows without your permission. You listen harder. Boot heel, small grind of grit, fabric whisper, your own soft engine. This is your favourite part. The interval where the world withdraws 1 degree and you discover you don't need it to be brighter to feel okay. Your shoulders drop the last half inch. Somewhere a clock argues that it's nearly 11. You decide to agree. You cross the threshold, and the house greets you with its familiar geography. The creak near the umbrella stand, the tile that refuses to be quiet. The polite draft that always meets you at the stair. The hedgehog's quill goes to the nightstand with the dignity of a relic. You open the window a palm's width, enough to let the moon supervise. In bed, you don't bother with the metronome. The walk has wound your pendulum back to sane. The hot pillow breathes its garden breath. Your feet, beneficiaries of the treaty with simple suppers, refuse to complain. One more little oddity surfaces as your eyes practice closing. Victorians sometimes recommended mooning a room. That is, drawing the curtains wide on clear nights to let sleepers bathe in the cool rays, as if the moon ran a cold tap for overheated minds. You have done exactly that, minus the brochure. Historians still debate whether lunar bathing soothed by physics or suggestion. You cradle the possibility that suggestion is physics you can feel from the inside. Final laugh before the lights in your head dim. If the hedgehog truly chases nightmares, consider hiring him for mornings too, to bristle at alarm clocks and escort them discreetly out. Joke 3. Compensation will be paid in beetles and kind words. Your breath lengthens until even the fondest anxieties find themselves yawning. The feather bed yields without smothering. The room is a bowl of cool milk for the sky. The moon floats a silver coin on your floorboards and asks for nothing but your attention, which slips gratefully, and then not at all. You open the cabinet and the empire rustles back. Labels in tidy copperplate lean like little flags from other climates. Valeriana officinalis, extract of Indian hemp, coca leaves, prue, cola nut, and a shy packet of passion flower pretending it has always lived beside the tea. The room smells like a travelling trunk, earthy, citrusy, and something distinctly old sock, which means the Valerian has clocked in for the night. You set a kettle on, tell your nerves they're getting diplomacy instead of artillery. No laudanum parade drums, no ether snowflake, just plants with passports. First Valerian. The root looks like something a determined mole might have dragged home for interior decoration. When you crush it in a mortar, it releases a scent that is equal parts damp cellar and cat daydream. Cats love the stuff the way gossips love windows. You half expect the neighbour's tabby to file a petition. You spoon a sensible pinch into a cup, pour water, and wait while the steam negotiates with your scepticism. The taste is less terrible than the smell, which is a backhanded compliment but still a compliment. Your jaw slackens by a quarter inch. Joke 1. If serenity had a flavour, it would be tea that forgot to shower. Herbs arrive with stories braided into their stems. Valerian, whispered across centuries. Steadies the nerves and invites slumber, and you can feel at least the invitation part. On the shelf beside it waits Indian hemp, a tincture of cannabis with a label that winks like a bohemian at a church picnic. Apothecaries sell it as a sedative for headaches and nervous unrest, usually in Victorian microsips that would make modern revellers weep. You measure 10 careful drops into a spoon of syrup, because the bottle has the word caution printed in the neatest and most persuasive font. A soft warmth spreads across your forehead like someone lowering the blinds by degrees. A legitimate event pads in on quiet feet. 1893 and 94, the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission into British India interviews hundreds of witnesses, compiles a skyscraper of testimony, and concludes that moderate traditional use of cannabis is not the ruin of civilization, at least not more than sugar, taxation, or badly written novels. The report is a doorstop and a mirror. Victorians love both. Historians still debate whether the commission offered clear-eyed nuance or colonial convenience dressed as science, but its pages hum with the surprise of officials discovering that a leaf can be both ordinary and complicated. You stir again, this time in a different direction on the spice compass. The coca jar opens like a bright window. The leaves are crisped and olive, smelling faintly of sun-warmed hay and the promise of mountains you've never earned the right to climb. Infusion, not chewing, is the household rule. You steep a few leaves, then add a sugar cube because you're a civilized insomniac, not a Spartan with a kettle. The first sip is springy and clean, a polite handshake from the Andes. You're not chasing a sprint, you're hoping for the old traveller's praise. Coca takes the edge off breath and bone, and perhaps, if the room's quiet agrees, the edge off 2 a.m. Coca arrives with European enthusiasm in its pockets. In 1863, a Corsican chemist blends coca with Bordeaux and invents a famous wine that makes bishops endorse things in public and ladies keep curious bottles near their embroidery. Across the Channel and decades, laboratories isolate cocaine in 1860. By 1884, an ophthalmologist in Vienna uses it as a local anaesthetic, and the medical world applauds a numbed cornea as if it were a small moon landing. You're not pouring wine or visiting a Viennese clinic. You're sipping a leaf water that tastes like tidy altitude. Historians still debate whether coca teas at home did anything beyond brighten moods long enough to make sleep possible. Some say it sharpened you. Others say it sanded away the day's burrs. You vote for sanding. Or quirky detail to amuse the cupboard. The cola nuts, stiff as buttons and brown as sensible shoes, carry caffeine like a distant drum. West African travellers chew them for stamina. European kitchens grate them into fashionable syrups. Your jar came with a pamphlet that claims refreshment without vulgar agitation, which is exactly how you wish to be remembered. You file that for mornings. Tonight, they keep the coca's company on the shelf like two cousins gossiping in another language. The kettle exhales its last useful breath. You pour a second Valerian cup to blend with a whisper of passion flower, because a pamphlet said the two are friends to fretful dreams. The flavour is meadowish. like lying under a hedge with your mouth open during haying season. Your hot pillow, remember that green-tinged friend, perks up from the bed, delighted to see its botanical cousins stepping in with their own lullabies. Joke 2. If you keep steeping things that smell like fields, a sheep may show up and ask for rent. The cabinet invites a thought you've been dodging. Empire ships traffic in remedies as confidently as they traffic in textiles and tea. The same routes that deliver your Coca and Cola carry heavier cargo and heavier history. You turn the labels in your hands and decide that gratitude and skepticism can share a chair. The world is large. This kitchen is small. Your sleep is somewhere between. Historians still debate whether the Victorian home apothecary was a triumph of accessible care or a brightly labelled distraction from structural ills. You can only confess that the labels are very persuasive at 11 o'clock. A newspaper clipping scrapbook in your head flips to a page about the 1864 British pharmacopoeia. The first attempt to standardise recipes across the kingdom so that valerian tincture in Manchester equals valerian tincture in Bath. The book looks like a choir book for bottles, standardisation. You suspect. Soothes insomniacs almost as much as drops do. It makes the world feel less like a raffle. You measure again with fussy pride. 10 drops of hemp into syrup, 1 cup of valerian passion flower, a small saucer of coca infusion to kiss and not to court. You avoid the weirder fads. No chlorodyne tonight with its murky triad of chloroform, morphia, and gossip. No hashish confections promising pyramids behind your eyelids. No bromide nightcaps that erase memory with the efficiency of a stern schoolmaster. You are categorically for sleep, not for parading across a dream Cairo in your dressing gown. Still that you can't resist the footnote. The Parisian Club des Hachichins in the 1840s experimented with cannabis in salons, producing essays instead of alibis. The fashion drifted to London like perfume worn too bravely. Your own bottle will not be asked for an essay tonight, only a lull. A modest calm lands. It doesn't trumpet, it arranges. The room's edges turn from pen nibs to soft pencils. Breathing meets the tea halfway. You think of the sanatorium and its neutral baths, of magnets and bells, of the mustard milk's gentle blacksmithing, of the featherbed's valley you learn to choose and mean. Plants are slower talkers than batteries and gases, but their grammar is kind. Joke 3. If your thoughts were a herd of goats, Valerian is the shepherd who knows all their nicknames and refuses to chase them after dark. Before you dim the lamp, you tuck the coca jar back behind the less interesting barley and the morally superior oatmeal. You set the hemp bottle farther back, the respectful distance reserved for things that help and could harm if allowed into melodrama. You let the valerian sit forward like a schoolteacher who grades generously. The hop pillow purrs, botanically speaking. Outside, a cart rolls an ellipsis down the street. Inside, the kettle cools in sentences. You leave the window a sensible crack. Not for miasma management, but for night's grammar, the comma a room needs between clauses. The bed forgives your earlier lectures about feathers. It has decided to hold you level without smothering. Your stomach, untroubled by circus suppers, contributes no side plots. The tea leaves an earthy afterword on your tongue, as if the garden signed your program. One last gallery of history walks by your eyelids. A Peruvian farmer with a basket of leaves in a mountain's patience. A Bengali physician debating a district officer about hemp, a British editor cutting lines from a pharmacopoeia with a very small pair of scissors, a cat deciding your Valerian saucer is a social event. Historians still debate whether any of these threads truly wove better sleep or merely stitched a story you could lie down inside. You decide a story you can lie down inside is already half a bed. You turn onto your side, let the hot pillow keep singing, and let the herb cabinet close itself in your mind with a click as soft as a seed pod splitting. Breath in, meadow. Breath out, map folded. The empire recedes to labels and gratitude. The room contracts to blanket and wrist. Sleep approaches wearing ordinary shoes. The corridor hushes the way a church hushes. Not by command, but by example. You walk in soft shoes behind a nurse whose lantern floats a small sun ahead of you. And the walls, lime-washed, undecorated, determinedly clean, absorb what's left of the day. You volunteered this time, not admitted, not committed, just a guest on the night round because your doctor swears that seeing how silence is made in a place built for rest might teach your nerves a new grammar. What the sanatorium did with water, the asylum will try with quiet. A bell has already struck the hour the building prefers to call bedtime regardless of argument. The men's ward lies to the left, the women's to the right. Your guide steers you down a middle strip of neutrality smelling faintly of soap, carbolic, and boiled linen. On a small table rests a ledger thick enough to stop a bullet. The nurse touches it as one touches a family Bible. Rules live here, lights out, windows cracked for ventilation, blankets counted, medicines noted, footsteps respectful. You read a line aloud in your head. Night sedation as ordered, chloral draft for bed 12, bromide mixture for bed 5, and file it away beside the laudanum bottle you keep at home and the valerian you pretend you prefer. A legitimate date leans into the lantern, the Lunacy Act of 1845 and its twin, the County Asylums Act, told counties to build places like this, supervised by a new lunacy commission, with notebooks and hard opinions. Before that, too many madhouses were private businesses with bolts that answered to no one. After, a certain bureaucratic mercy arrived with registers and inspections. Historians still debate whether the acts improved lives or merely expanded custody with better handwriting. Your lamplit corridor suggests both, a safety you can smell and a formality you can trip over. In the first ward, beds line the walls like the idea of order made wooden. Iron frames stand at attention, sheets white as punctuation, pillows thin to discourage dreams too showy. A woman lies with an ice compress folded across her brow, changed every half hour without fail. The way constellations get redrawn by sailors. She does not wake when the nurse rotates the cloth. Sleep has claimed her under a dose of chloral hydrate, the century's knockout discovered in 1832 and praised in the 1870s as if the Sandman had earned a diploma. You think of your ether handkerchief and your poppy tea and decide chemistry tastes different when poured by someone who has a ledger. The nurse gestures to a corner chair with arm boards, restraint by suggestion rather than strap, and explains the ward's proud rule, non-restraint. The doctrine that flourished in the 1830s and 40s under men like John Connolly at Hanwell, where attendants were trained to substitute attention for tying. Not all hospitals succeeded or even tried. Some kept the old trappings, the camisole, the straps, the notorious crib that turned a bed into a cage. Here, the chair is mostly theatre. You sit, briefly, to feel how it asks a body to relax in one direction only. Historians still debate whether non-restraint truly freed patients or simply hid coercion in gentler furniture. Your shoulders, invited downward, vote for gentler, or anyway. Quirky item on a shelf. A wooden rattle, not for infants but for the night sister to summon help without shouting. A cricket's instrument scaled for corridors. Beside it, a basket stocked with ice, bandages, and a muffle in case of shouting. The muffle is a small quilt for voices. A kindness that might be a silencer depending on your mood. You run your fingers over the basket's handle and think of your hot pillow at home, cousins in the sleep trade, one perfumed and voluntary, the other practical and stern. You pass a window open on a restrictor. The night air arrives vetted. Florence Nightingale's shadow moves with you, approving the draft, approving the iron, frowning at anything that looks like feather. You remember her campaign against suffocating bedding and shut windows. Tonight the ward bears her seal. In bed 9, a woman mutters to someone who isn't allowed in the building. The nurse hums, not a tune so much as a human vowel, and the mutter unwinds. You think of your metronome and realise that in here the human voice is the metronome, the slow tick that puts thoughts into the same room as bodies. A legitimate thread of asylum lore unwinds, the York Retreat in 1796, older than your Victorian comfort zone. Yes, but the philosophical seed offered moral treatment, meaning kindness, occupation, walks in gardens, and as little violence as possible, that idea, exported and bureaucratised, reached this ward with fewer Quaker teacups and more ledger lines, but an intent you can still taste through the carbolic. Do not fight the mind, invite it to something simpler. Historians still debate whether moral treatment soothed the sleepless or merely renamed wakefulness as sin. The woman under the ice compress looks beyond renaming. On a table waits a stack of sleep caps, soft flannel hoods meant to keep the head warm without trapping breath. You try one on, with permission and a laugh, and feel immediately ridiculous and immediately comforted, like a teapot pretending to be a person. Joke 1. If you wore this to bed at home, your mirror would file a formal objection. Your pillow would approve on stationery scented with hops. The nurse shrugs. If it keeps them from fussing with their hair and keeps the ears from freezing, it keeps the ward quiet. You add ear serenity to your list of theories. Medication hour completed. The nurse dims the lamps until the wicks remember how to be polite. A patrol proceeds. Check the windows. Dip a hand into a basin to test lukewarmness for a midnight sponge if fevers rise. Tally pillows, tally blankets. In one cubicle, a woman has been set to a rest cure. The fashionable prescription imported from America and adapted here. Bed rest, milk, massage, forbidden books. You tasted the milk part at home with mustard. Here the rule comes with watchful eyes. Your skin crawls at the thought of being told to stop thinking by decree. Historians still debate whether rest cures gave bodies a truce or minds a prison. You reserve judgment and sneak the patient a look that says, "I see you." Quirky apparatus in a cupboard, a sandbag for placing over an anxious chest, a soft weight like a sleepy cat. You think of the hop pillow again and wonder if the entire world's insomnia could be solved by responsible cats. Joke 2. You propose to the nurse that the ward adopt 3. She replies the cats would unionize and insist on midnight sardine breaks. There's also a bottle of bromide mixture, the decade's fashionable sedative that erases edges and occasionally memories. You've avoided edit at home because your dreams already misplace their keys. A clock far down the corridor sighs the hour again. The ward replies not with silence but with evenly spaced sounds. A page turned by the duty aide. A glass set down. The smallest snore like a quail. The wind seminar at the cracked window. The nurse replaces an ice compress with one warm to tepid, no shocks after midnight, and tucks a quilt corner as if practicing origami. The building shines its gutters at the moon. You remember the hedgehog's quill in your pocket last night, and wonder how much of sleep is charm, and how much is choreography. The nurse shows you the muff room, not a punishment cell, she stresses, but a padded space where pacing feet can spend their adolescence without waking the world. The floor gives kindly under your shoe. You imagine your most talkative thoughts being asked to jump here until they're winded. Joke 3. You consider starting a late-night calisthenics club for anxieties. 5 jumping jacks, then lights out. Historians still debate whether rooms like this protected dignity or hid distress from view. You step out carefully, as if leaving a chapel. On the way back to the nurse's desk, you pass a window box of lavender. Yes, even here. Someone has tucked sprigs under 2 pillows, sanctioned smuggling. You breathe in, and your hot pillow sends a postcard from home. A final ledger line catches your eye. Night talk reduced by 1/2, general quiet obtained. The phrasing is bureaucratic poetry. You picture your own room with such a note. Number of wheels heard, 2. Number of worries pursued, 1. Lost. General quiet obtained. Before you go, a legitimate image from the archive glides by. John Connolly walking a ward at Hanwell in 1839 without keys at his belt jingling. Non-restraint made audible by the absence of iron music. He wrote that gentleness can be a policy, not a personality quirk. The nurse beside you, whose gentleness is decidedly a policy, pours you a tumbler of barley water and dismisses you to bed like a schoolmaster who secretly loves you. Historians still debate whether the asylum saved more sleep than they stole. Tonight you've watched quiet manufactured, carefully timed Huilbof to be called a craft. Outside, the night breathes wider. You carry the barley taste back along a path where bells, baths, magnets, mustard, feathers, herbs, and hedgehogs have all taken their turns. Your bed, which once threatened to swallow you whole, now looks like an honest piece of furniture in a world where some people have none. You crack the window, the regulation inch out of solidarity with bed 12, and fold your own flannel cap under your cheek, daring the mirror to complain in the morning. When your eyelids close, they do so like ledgers written to the end of the line, signed, dated, and gently shelved. You arrive at a parlour that has decided to audition for the moon. Curtains drawn, lamps turned low, a single spotlight on a table where a polished drum spins on a brass spindle, slots cut into its sides like a crown with second thoughts. Around it, chairs in a ring, on the mantel, a fan of coloured lenses, blue, amber, rose, mounted in a contraption called prismatic goggles. The host, part inventor, part theatre usher, invites you to take the tour of sleep without going anywhere. You have bathed with glaciers, negotiated with feathers, worn an electrical tiara, and drunk a salad that thought it was medicine. What's one more guided daydream? First a little talking spell. The mesmerist, no cloak, just a respectable frock coat and a voice like linen, asks you to rest your hands on your knees, eyes on his watch chain, breath like a tide you trust. He doesn't say hypnosis yet. That word is still getting its shoes on. A legitimate history strolls in and sits on the sofa. In the 1840s, a Scottish surgeon named James Braid watched a travelling mesmerist at work and rebranded the spectacle as hypnotism, arguing it was focused attention, not mysterious fluids doing the magic. Later, in the 1870s and 80s, Jean-Martin Charcot would draw crowds at the Salpêtrière in Paris, demonstrating states of suggestion like a professor orchestrating weather. Historians still debate whether these sessions revealed a new map of the mind or taught audiences to play parts they were already good at. Your part, tonight, is the insomniac willing to be persuaded. Notice the weight of the eyelids, the mesmerist murmurs, and let the chair do more work than you. This sounds suspiciously like sanity. He passes a hand slowly before your brow, no theatrics, just cadence, and invites you to imagine last night's metronome tick moving to your breath. You oblige. The room shrinks to palm and voice, and the citrus ghost of someone's gloves. Joke 1. If all else fails, you consider hypnotizing your pillow into supporting your neck better. It has been stubbornly independent lately. He does not command sleep, he suggests order. You've learnt this choreography. The bells and magnet taught breath, the sanatorium taught schedules, the mustard milk taught warmth, the hot pillow taught hedgerows. Mesmerism's gift is the sentence you may stop trying now. Your shoulders accept the memo. In a moment, he says, we'll play with light. He means the drum, a zoetrope, though he uses the friendlier term, dream machine. And you forgive the anachronism because the thing hums like a toy that also writes essays. It begins to spin. A lamp placed behind its slits throws a series of quick shadows as drawings on the inner strip spring to life. Little running figures, a fish that refuses to be reasonable, a moon that lifts and lowers its eyebrows like a witty aunt. You watch through the slots, and flicker becomes motion, becomes rhythm. You don't have to count. Nearby, a praxinoscope, a smarter cousin with mirrors, adds polish, swapping the slitted walls for a ring of reflections that make the images steadier, less prone to headache, kinder to the nervous. Sir David Brewster's kaleidoscope from 1817 would be proud. So would the praxinoscope's inventor, Émile Reynaud, who coaxed parlour tricks towards cinema. A legitimate event bows from the wings. Charles Wheatstone's stereoscope, 1838, leading to Holmes' handier version, 2 pictures, 1 eye per picture, 1 brain making depth where there was none. Europe fell for it like a polite feint. Historians still debate whether these gadgets soothed sleepless minds or merely gave them better things to think about in the dark. Now the prismatic goggles, glass panes that tint the world into cordial flavours, blue to cool you, amber to warm, rose to make everyone look like a kind letter you forgot to answer. Our host claims blue quiet's cerebral excitement. You're tempted to point out that the word excitement has never entered your skull after 10 in any flattering sense. Still, you try the blue, the room becomes a lagoon. The zoetrope's spinning fish swims in colder water. Your breath follows suit, slower strokes, smoother shorelines. Joke 2. You will henceforth refer to your most dramatic thoughts as cerebral excitement, and send them to bed without dessert. The mesmerist seats himself at your flank and counts. 5, the chair owns you. 4, the breath remembers the metronome. 3, your shoulders have stopped auditioning for the opera. 2, the lids are lazy. 1, you are heavy and ordinary. Heavy and ordinary. After weeks of being fancy about sleep, the phrase is exquisite. Unglamorous rest like bread, like a plain biscuit at 10. He suggests that when you go home, you choose one simple ritual and keep it. The science, if that's the word, is exactly what you've been proving to yourself across bells and baths. Repetition persuades flesh. Quirky apparatus on the side table, a phosphenoscope, a pinwheel of black and white patterns that, when spun and viewed through slits, tempts the eye to see colours that aren't there. A parlour cousin to the afterimages you get when you stare at the gas mantle too long. The inventor claims it distracts the diseased imagination from its hauntings. You translate, occupy the gremlin, you try a few rounds of spirals. They make promises of tunnels and then kindly abandon you before the panic. Your hedgehog charm, still in your pocket from last night, enjoys the ride, or at least doesn't object. The mesmerist's patter shifts to the practical. He's read his braid. He quotes a physician who prescribes auto-hypnosis, for persistent wakefulness. Fix the eyes on a dull object, breathe steadily. Repeat a phrase like calmly now and allow the mind to drift without chasing it. You think of the asylum nurse's corridor hum, you think of the sanatorium's neutral bath, you think of your own kitchen's toast water. The common thread is a refusal to argue with the night. Historians still debate whether hypnosis truly rearranged insomnia or simply gave it new curtains. Either way, the curtains are a fetching blue with a comfortable hem. Someone dims the lamp another degree and sets a stereoscope in your hands, the kind with a wooden hood like half a toy theatre. You slide a card into the clip, 2 photographs of the Crystal Palace, and the glass snaps them into one shimmering, impossible room. You walk forward while sitting still. The trick calibrates your attention the way a metronome calibrates your breath. 2 pictures, 1 mind, agreement. Your pulse casually resigns its position as union leader. Joke 3. You consider sending your pulse to a week-long course on not doing so much. In the corner, an automaton blinks. Of course there's an automaton. Its wooden face smiles, and its chest contains a spring that pretends to be inspiration. It is a reminder that Victorians build sleep the way they build toys, with gears, lights, suggestion, and the hope that the heart will agree to be a machine for an hour. The host offers a final demonstration: silent suggestion. He has you close your eyes behind the blue lenses and, without speaking, moves the zoetrope's light so the flicker slows, then stops, then begins again. Your body follows as if start and stop were written on your skin. You resist the urge to applaud because you are deeply, gloriously lazy at this minute. A last historical cameo waves from the doorway. John Elliotson, bold and controversial, who in the 1830s championed mesmerism at University College Hospital until peers scolded, patients performed, and reputations caught fire. His journal, The Zoist, argued for medical uses, pain relief, nervous disorders, sometimes credulously, sometimes bravely. Whether charlatan, harried pioneer, or gullible enthusiast, he sits in our circle tonight like a cautionary story with kind eyes. Historians still debate whether mesmerism gave physicians a tool or a stage. You, for one, will take any tool that tells your bones to lower the volume. The evening ends without drama. That's the best part. No popping ether, no vinegar battery, no ice water surprise. You thank the host. He bows with the economy of a man who knows sleepy people are grateful in a different key. Outside, the air has that laundried feel it gets after midnight. When the city tucks in its corners, you carry the blue in your eyes a few steps longer, then it fades to ordinary grey. The hedgehog quill remembers your pocket. The street's hush collaborates. At home, you do as instructed. One ritual only. You draw the curtains, crack the window, set the metronome but do not start it, and say one phrase, heavy and ordinary, like a password to a club you've been trying to join for years. The bed lifts you just enough to notice. The hot pillow edits the sentence. The Feather Valley has learned its manners. You do not spin, you do not count, you do not pore or shock or credulously consult the moon. You let suggestion be a bridge between a noisy century and a quiet mammal, and you cross it without looking down. You stand in your own century's hallway with a hand on the light switch and a pocket full of ghosts. The hot pillow has gone thin with use. The metronome naps in its walnut den. The mustard tin winks from the kitchen shelf, and the blue lenses from last night's dream machines have left a small lagoon in your eyes. The question you promised to answer is simple enough to fit on a calling card and tricky enough to hire a lawyer. What do you take with you, and what do you leave behind? You, the modern mammal, sleep under LEDs and deadlines, but your nerves are still a 19th century stringed instrument that wants tuning more than scolding. Start with the obvious. Ritual beats drama. Every cure that helped you, even a little, began by shrinking the night into something you could touch. A clock's tick made into breath. A cup warmed in your hands. A walk that taught your feet to keep a promise. A window opened just enough to let the world participate. You can translate that backward and forward. Call it sleep hygiene if you must. The Victorians called it the hygiene of sleep. Lectures given under Gaslight by people who believed in fresh air, like a religion that didn't ask for tithes. So you dim your screens as if they hiss. You keep your room cool as if Florence Nightingale is grading your drafts. And you pick one ritual, just one, and make it boring on purpose. Joke 1. Boredom is an underpaid nurse. Give her a raise and a regular shift. Keep the kindness, not the poisons. The poppy's lullaby was real. So were the ledgers that quietly tallied mornings stolen. Your laudanum cabinet taught you that mercy can come in a bottle and also write its own sad sequel. You do not need to be a teetotaler from the temperance hall to learn this. You only need to remember your best nights arrived when the help was gentle, measurable, and not in charge. If you're tempted by modern cousins, capsules that promise a velvet hammer, let the apothecary's blue poison glass raise its ribbed hand in your memory. Historians still debate whether the rise of regulation rescued the sleepless or pushed them toward new labels with old appetites. But your pulse has learned a quieter truth. Dose is not a bedtime story, it's a plot twist. The kitchen stays. Mustard milk was earnest. Toast water was surprisingly decent. Carrots were carrots, bless them. The point wasn't chemistry, it was choreography, the refusal to make your stomach fight gladiators after dusk. You translate that to your own pantry. Simple supper. 3 hours of peace before pillow. A glass of water that behaves. You skip the charcoal biscuits unless your doctor insists or your fireplace asks for a cameo. You keep almonds. You keep nutmeg because your nose remembers the way it softened the room into something rounder. Electricity? Keep the part that learned humility. Your galvanic crown felt like a science fair with a velvet trim. Your age has cousins with nicer packaging. But the lesson survived the century. Small, steady cues are better than fireworks. The metronome taught you that bodies like being asked to match, not mastered. Your phone already ticks. In its way, calendar chimes, reminders, media set to repeat. You let those become lullabies instead of headlines. A playlist softer than the bells. A fan that hums like a friendly dynamo. Joke 2. If your brain insists on being a power plant after midnight, hire it as a night janitor instead. Quiet tasks only, no welding. Feathers? You learn to negotiate. Softness that swallows becomes worry in disguise. Firmness that scolds makes you a martyr to posture. You found a valley and meant it, with the window cracked and the draft tuned to mercy. Your century sells mattresses with more layers than pastry. The Victorians would be thrilled and faint in equal measure. Choose the one that lets you hear your breath without listening to your spine complain. Keep the hot pillow if only as a scented memory. Trade the rest for washable, breathable, boring. Hospitals got that right early with their iron frames and scaldable linen. Not glamorous, but sleep rarely is. The sanatorium? Keep the schedule. Toss the sermon. Dew walking at dawn is optional. Neutral baths are a mood you can reconstruct with a warm shower and a towel that minds its own business. The bell rings at 10 because you said so, not because an attendant clicks a ledger. Your day can be a series of tiny permissions. Eat like you're on speaking terms with your stomach, walk like you're teaching your pulse to pronounce leisure, and make the bed a place that remembers you kindly. Magnets and bells, mesmerists and goggles, zoetropes that spun fish into patience. Keep the idea that attention is a creature you can invite, not a tyrant you must obey. The heavy and ordinary password is no less beautiful under a dim modern bulb. Meditation apps, breathing boxes, white noise winds, these are the polite descendants of parlours that admitted wonder into the work. You don't need to stage a séance, you need to stage an absence of performance. One legitimate headline from a few years after your Victorian tour deserves a frame on your wall. In 1909, the British Medical Association published Secret Remedies, an exposé that unscrewed bottles and weighed powders, naming names and measuring claims. People gasped to learn what their tonics actually contained. It was part scandal, part service, and it nudged a public accustomed to trusting labels into reading them. You inherit that literacy. Whether your bottle says valerian or nighttime formula, whether your tea name's a flower or a fantasy, you can be the person who asks. Not just does it work, but what is it asking from me tomorrow? Quirky habits worth smuggling across time, the sleep cap, ridiculous, effective, warm ears, stopwatch bathing for anxious thoughts, 5 minutes in the sink of worry, then pull the plug, the small weight on the chest, sandbag then, weighted blanket now. The window cracked even when the street is practicing trumpet. Fresh air is a polite liar that somehow tells the truth. The hedgehog charm, eat the steak, not the spike. Your pocket can hold a pebble from a moonlight walk, a token that says, I have walked out under a sky and returned. Joke 3. If your alarm clock hisses at the pebble and claims jurisdiction, remind it you know a hedgehog with excellent references. Your modern worries dress differently. Email like confetti, news like lightning. But the body underneath hasn't evolved a new lullaby in 100 years. It still answers to rhythm, temperature, darkness, safety, the removal of spectacle. It still believes a room's grammar, commas instead of exclamation points. It still likes being bored kindly. Historians still debate whether the Victorian age invented a new insomnia or gave old restlessness a better vocabulary. You, standing with your hand on the switch, can borrow the vocabulary without the arsenic wallpaper. So you make a small museum of bedtime. The metronome, now a breathing count. The hop pillow, now a dab of lavender or nothing at all. The kitchen, still the kingdom of humble. The window, still a negotiator. The schedule, still the kindest tyrant you'll ever meet. You retire the laudanum to history where it belongs, nod to the bells, smile at the goggles, and keep the phrase that changed the temperature of your bones heavy and ordinary. You do not need to be brilliant at sleeping, you need to be mammal at sleeping. You click the light, you let the fan become your new gas flame without the headache, and you pull the blanket up like a curtain whose play is silence. The city, this century's or the last one's, keeps its own watch. You're off duty. The orchestra you've assembled all week takes the stage and does something ravishingly simple. It plays nothing, together. The room leans toward quiet the way a field leans toward dusk. Softening at the edges, trading corners for curves, you turn one more time, not to fix anything, only to find the cool side with the care of a hand learning a familiar page. The window is a breath held kindly, a thin ribbon that smooths the air above your cheek and says in a voice you don't have to answer, yes, the world is still out there and it is not asking for you just now. Across the floor, the metronome is closed, but the habit it taught you stays open. In, slow, out, slower. The words you chose orally widen and soften, losing their consonants until they are only weather. Heavy and ordinary. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe remembers the day and decides not to tell you about it. Somewhere outside, a wheel rolls a single polite syllable and stops. You think, briefly, of the parade you walked, iron and lettuce, bells and magnets, clocks and baths, feathers and hedgehogs, herbs with passports and blue glass promising cooler thoughts, and you feel them not as instructions anymore but as small companions who know when to be quiet. The best of them have followed you here, fading at the edges like friends who understand when a hallway is actually a goodbye. The ceiling becomes a shallow lake with no wind. Your eyelids drift lower, then lower again, until the room is mostly the warmth where your hands rest and the faintest shape of the curtain's hem. Nothing important is happening, and that is the important thing. The body, patient animal, folds itself into the nest it knows. Breath is a tide that forgot to make news. When the last thin thought arrives looking for somewhere to sit, you nod toward the dark and it finds its place without ceremony. You are safe, you are simple, you are carried.